Chapter 35-36. Yi Shiwen had never thought that a mere doppelganger could be this powerful. So, how powerful would his main body be? It was simply unimaginable. It was very likely that he was the City Lord of Moon City or a middle heavenly master. Based on the strength of Yi Shiwen's sword principal doppelganger, this was not impossible. It was no wonder that those demon supremacies were so obedient to demon supremacy Luoho. Even if there was a difference of 2 realms between them, there was no need for them to be so obedient. Now, he finally understood that it was probably not demon supremacy Luoho's doppelganger, but demon supremacy Luoho's main body that was hidden behind him. The main body that could take their lives at any time. No wonder demon Lord Luoho dared to say that he would sacrifice himself. It turned out that he had such confidence. Because it was just a sword-principled doppelganger, it could be sacrificed at will. It would not pose a fatal threat to his main body. If it were Yi Shiwen, he would probably do the same. Although the sword-principled doppelganger was very important, it was not more important than the main body. After knowing that Demon Lord Luoho was just a doppelganger, many unsolved mysteries were also solved. This included how Demon Lord Luoho obtained so many means. He actually dared to attack an era's heavenly way with the strength of the 7th realm. Even if it was an era's heavenly way that was on the verge of extinction, it was still not something that ordinary people could look up to. Now that Yi Shiwen had destroyed a doppelganger, Demon Lord Luoho must have suffered a great loss of vitality. He must hate Yi Shiwen deeply. However, Yi Shiwen did not care. After all, he had only offended one more expert of the Devil Dao era. With the bad relationship between the Martial Dao era and the Devil Dao era, as Yi Shiwen moved higher and higher and gradually became a high-level official of the Fortune God dynasty, the relationship between them would not be any better. Furthermore, he had killed many demon venerables from the demonic Dao epoch. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in a flash. In a short time, Yi Shiwen had already killed Demon Venerable Rahu. The 3 Demon Venerables probably didn't expect Yi Shiwen to kill Demon Venerable Rahu so quickly. They also didn't expect Demon Venerable Rahu to be so vulnerable after he unleashed his absolute strength. At this moment, they were stunned. After that, their first reaction was to turn around and escape. However, how could Yi Shiwen watch them escape? This was the best fertilizer for watering the world tree and allowing the world tree fruit to mature quickly. Yi Shiwen could only rely on the world tree fruit to improve his strength in a short time without any side effects. The 3 of them made a decision in an instant and decided to flee in the opposite direction. If they fled together, then it would seem like a big scene. However, it would also be easy for Yi Shiwen to capture them in one fell swoop, and they wouldn't have the slightest chance of victory. They had witnessed how Yi Shiwen had killed Demon Lord Luoho. He was simply a monster. They couldn't possibly be his opponent. Isn't it too late to escape now? Yi Shiwen shouted. His body shook slightly and split into 2 clones. They chased after the demon lords in 2 different directions. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen chased after one of the demon lords. The demon lords were too fast. If Yi Shiwen did not split his clones to chase after them, they could easily escape no matter how fast Yi Shiwen was. That demon lord clearly felt a terrifying aura getting closer and closer. He turned around and saw that it was Yi Shiwen himself. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He was almost scared to death. However, he had no choice. When he was about to counterattack, Yi Shiwen had already made a move. His foot stomped down heavily like a mountain. Bang! The demon sovereign let out a miserable cry and was crushed to pieces on the spot. His entire soul was heavily injured. However, just as he was about to reassemble his body, a huge hand descended from the sky and grabbed his primordial spirit from his body. Although the spirit of a celestial master was very powerful, it was vulnerable when facing a celestial master without the protection of his body. The big hand suddenly grabbed the spirit of the demon lord and killed it. It didn't even have a chance to struggle. Yi Shiwen crushed the devil lord's body after he had killed the soul of the devil lord. Then his body transformed into blood essence that filled the sky. Then he poured it into the world tree in his inner world. The roots of the world tree wriggled and absorbed all the essence blood. This was the world tree's source that nurtured endless worlds. There was nothing that the world tree couldn't absorb. After absorbing the essence blood of this Empyrean, the world tree grew a few meters taller. Although it wasn't much compared to its current towering figure, it was still very amazing. This was because the world tree was very long in the early stages, and growing 1 meter taller in the later stages was very difficult. It would take tens of thousands of years. Only by devouring the essence blood of an Empyrean could it grow quickly, saving countless years of growth. This was also Yi Shiwen's hope. As long as the world tree could grow in time, even if there was a great apocalypse, it would be able to withstand it. With the world tree as the center, even the great apocalypse would not affect the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. At that time, not only would he be able to protect himself, but he would also be able to protect the people he wanted to protect. Furthermore, he would be able to preserve a portion of the martial epic's vitality. In the future, he would be able to gain the upper hand until he obtained that supreme opportunity. But now, the world tree was still too young. Although it looked big enough at the moment, the legendary world tree was so big that it could have worlds hanging on it like fruits. That was the true, complete world tree. At this time, the fruit of the world tree hanging on the world tree had ripened a little more. It had begun to emit a tempting fruit fragrance. It was not long before it ripened. If it was in the past, the fruit of the world tree could be consumed now. But it was different now. He wanted to break through from the sixth realm to the peak of the sixth realm. The martial power he needed was almost equal to half of the previous total. The demand for martial power was also greater. But even so, after continuous watering, it was about to ripen and could be harvested. Not long after Yi Shiwen had beheaded this devil lord, the other two doppelgangers also received good news. They had successfully beheaded the other two devil lords. Their primordial spirits had been destroyed, and their corporeal bodies had been crushed into blood essence, which had been poured into the world tree. The energy contained in the blood essence of a demon lord of the fifth realm was indeed huge. But unfortunately, demon lord Rahu self-destructed. Otherwise, with the blood essence contained in his body, he should be able to accelerate the ripening of the world tree. The two demon lords probably didn't expect that the gap between their strength and Yi Shiwen's had reached such a level. Not only were they not a match for Yi Shiwen's demon lord, but only an incarnation of Yi Shiwen was enough to defeat them. Originally, there was a huge gap between their strength and Yi Shiwen's. Now that Yi Shiwen had entered the sixth realm, the gap between the strength of both sides had widened exponentially. After killing these demon lords, Yi Shiwen only glanced at the depths of the chaos near the edge of the martial epic. Then, he leaped and disappeared in this chaos. After Yi Shiwen left, two figures emerged from the chaos. They were two Emperor Devil Supremes. At this moment, their backs were cold and their faces were pale. Just because Yi Shiwen simply glanced at them, it was enough to make them tremble. There was no other reason. Just one glance was enough to make them tremble. They had witnessed a terrifying fight from beginning to end. The famous demon lords of the devil era had been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen as if they were little chicks. It was as if Yi Shiwen had slaughtered them effortlessly. Perhaps they would never forget such a scene for the rest of their lives. Especially that demon Lord Luo Ho. He was one of the few people who ranked at the peak of the demon epic. Although it was not his original body, his avatar was killed just like that. It was still shocking news that shocked the entire demon epic. They naturally didn't think that they could hide well from Yi Shiwen. After all, it was simply impossible. Even someone as arrogant and conceited as them knew that the disparity between a devil lord and a devil emperor couldn't be calculated with logic. The only possibility was that Yi Shiwen was too lazy to kill them. He did not even have the desire to kill them. Although this conclusion was very sullen, it was true. Compared to a celestial lord, they were too weak. Yi Shiwen could destroy them with one finger. How terrifying! This martial venerable is at least 100 times more terrifying than the intelligence reports. One of the demon emperors said. He only felt a chill on his back. After being glanced at by Yi Shiwen, they really felt like they had walked past the gates of hell. They could die at any time. Life and death were not in their control. This was probably how ordinary creatures felt when they faced them. Our mission was to stop him and kill him if we discover him. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. How can we stop him? Another demon emperor could not help but say gloomily. The reason why they came here with the identity of a demon emperor was because, according to the intelligence they received, Yi Shiwen should have been seriously injured. At this time, he could not even defeat an emperor lord. They had come here with the hope of slaughtering a celestial venerate. Otherwise, no matter how strong the demon emperor was, he was still an extreme expert. In the demonic epoch, he was also a high and mighty figure. He would not have personally come here to do such a thing. But now, Yi Shiwen did not look like he was injured at all. It was good enough that he could survive. Wanting to kill a celestial lord was really thinking too much. Forget it. What happens next is no longer something we can handle. Let's send the news back and return to Moon City. Okay. The two immediately decided to leave this place that made them feel a lingering fear. Chapter 35-37. Yi Shiwen naturally saw the two demon emperors. However, he couldn't be bothered with them at this moment. He immediately stepped into the martial epic's territory. It was only after truly adventuring through the primal chaos that he realized how important his own era was to an Empyrean. If one were to say that there were no buffs in the primal chaos, then in one's own era, heavenly Tao suffocation, one would be able to buff all sorts of buffs, especially when enemies were invading. But in someone else's era, one would be suppressed. This was completely different. After returning to the martial epoch, Yi Shiwen clearly felt that his spiritual power was recovering much faster. It was as if he had returned to his mother's embrace. Yi Shiwen's speed was very fast. In just a moment, he had already returned to Sun City. Although he couldn't tell the direction in the chaos, he had already left a mark in Sun City. As long as he followed the mark, he would definitely not go the wrong way. Many extreme Tao powerhouses who walked in the primal chaos relied on these coordinates to form a map that belonged to them. That way, they wouldn't get lost. When he returned to Sun City no longer looked as if it was facing a formidable enemy. Obviously, the invasion of the Scarlet Serpent Demon was over. However, Yi Shiwen could already feel that there were many more powerful auras in Sun City. Compared to when he left, there were far more of them. The Middle Heavenly Masters have returned. Yi Shiwen immediately reacted. The only reason for such a situation was the return of the Middle Heavenly Masters. Looking at the time, it was indeed time for the Middle Heavenly Masters to return to the battlefield from the Fortune God Dynasty. With so many experts gathered here, there was no need for them to act as if they were facing a great enemy, let alone a sneak attack like Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerables. Even if the Demonic Path Epoch were to launch a large-scale invasion, only death awaited them. There was no way they could gain the upper hand. Yi Shiwen immediately entered Sun City. He didn't hide. So the moment he entered Sun City, he was already known by the Celestial Masters. Wu Zun, please come. Yi Shiwen had yet to return to the human race's encampment when he heard the deep voice of the Middle Heavenly Master. Yi Shiwen turned around and followed the direction of the voice. He arrived at the venue of the Celestial Masters Convention in the depths of Sun City. At this time, all the Celestial Masters in Sun City had gathered here and seemed to be discussing something. Sitting at the very top were the Middle Empyrean, the Western Empyrean, the Northern Empyrean, the Southern Empyrean, the Space-Time Empyrean, and the Sun City City Lord. The other city lords hadn't come at all. They were all defending their god cities to prevent what had happened to Moon City from happening again. When Yi Shiwen came in, everyone's eyes suddenly fell on him. Fellow Wu Zun, it's good that you're fine. I heard that you chased after them, but there was no news until now. I was afraid that something had happened to you. The first to speak was the War Elder. He had a very good relationship with Yi Shiwen. In fact, their relationship was even better than that of allies. So, He was naturally very happy to see Yi Shiwen return safe and sound. However, not everyone was happy about Yi Shiwen's safe and sound return. There were also a few auras that were obviously not very happy. However, these people were nothing more than clowns for Yi Shiwen. So, he didn't even care about them. I've let everyone wait for me for so long. It's really rude of me. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands in obeisance and laughed heartily. It's all right. Wu Zun, I heard that you chased after Tong Zun. What was the result? He didn't know what happened after that. He only knew that Yi Shiwen had chased after Tong Zun. However, he had disappeared after that. I killed him, Yi Shiwen faintly said, as if he was talking about something unimportant. It was as if he was talking about having breakfast. Arrogant. This word appeared in the minds of many heavenly venerables. However, they didn't know that killing a bronze venerable wasn't a big deal for Yi Shiwen. He had even killed demon venerable Luoho of the 7th realm. So, a mere bronze venerable was nothing to him. And, said the middle heavenly venerable with a nod. Fortunately, you killed him. Otherwise, I would have killed him myself. He actually let the Moon City Lord escape. Damn it, said the middle heavenly venerable with a frightening look in his eyes. He had caught the Moon City Lord off guard. It wasn't easy for him to seal the Moon City Lord. In the end, the Moon City Lord was rescued by someone else. Wasn't this releasing a tiger back into the mountains? Wasn't there another strong opponent? Once a tyrannical existence like the Moon City Lord escaped, the consequences would be unimaginable. It wouldn't be so easy to capture him the next time. Especially since he had defected to the Devil Era, it was tantamount to the Devil Era being like a tiger that had grown wings. Even in the Fortune God dynasty, there weren't many experts of this level, and they could be considered as talents with strategic deterrence. But this kind of person had actually managed to escape. At this point, Huang Xiaolong was already regretting his decision. If he had known this would happen, he would have killed the Moon City's castellan on the spot. At that time, although the Moon City Lord had made a big mistake, it wasn't to the point where he had to be killed. It was only a seal. He had to take into account the other city lords' faces. Especially if he killed the city lords so easily, the other experts of the same level would feel sorry for him. However, it had resulted in such a serious consequence. It was unimaginable. Next to him, the Re-City Lord's face was a little ugly because the Moon City Lord was rescued right under his nose. Although the Crimson Demon Venerable, a strategic expert from the demonic era, was dispatched, it was an indisputable fact that the Moon City Lord was rescued right under his nose. How could he look good at this time? At that time, he was the only person in charge of the city. In the end, he was naturally responsible for anything that happened. Wu Zun, I would like to ask, why did you only return today after chasing after Lord Tong? Suddenly, someone opened his mouth. Yi Shiwen looked over and saw that it was a middle-aged man in his 30s. He was dressed in a luxurious robe. His green eyes were like emeralds. He actually had the strength of the 7th realm, which was no less than Demon Lord Luo Ho. Of course, he was the main body, while Demon Lord Luo Ho was just an avatar. Who are you? What qualifications do you have to question me? Yi Shiwen raised his eyebrows and asked. I am Tian Cheng's Supreme Bone. The middle-aged man said, I am here as the representative of the Heaven City Lord. As far as I know, you chased after him for a long time. Why did you return after such a long time? What's the secret? The middle-aged Supreme Bone's words were full of hostility. He was one of the people who Yi Shiwen had sensed with hostility. What does how long I took to chase after him have anything to do with you? Who do you think you were to question me? Yi Shiwen sneered. Supreme Bone obviously didn't expect Yi Shiwen to be so arrogant and unruly. He didn't put him in his eyes at all and directly said that he was not qualified to question him. Indeed, there were so many real rulers of the Fortune God dynasty present, and he was not qualified to question him at all. However, he still couldn't help but speak angrily. At this time, Warlord's words came into Yi Shiwen's ears. Fellow Wu Zun, there's no need to be angry. I'm afraid the reason why Supreme Bone is targeting you is because he's Tong Zun's best friend. Everyone in the 10 Divine Cities knows about this. I think it's because you've killed Tong Zun that he couldn't help but speak up. After hearing Warlord's explanation, Yi Shiwen immediately understood what Supreme Bone was trying to do. It turned out that it was related to Lord Tong. Before Lord Tong betrayed the Fortune God dynasty, he had also made many best friends in the 10 great divine cities. Now, although he had betrayed the Fortune God dynasty, but Yi Shiwen's killing of him would still cause a lot of people to be unhappy. Yi Shiwen sneered as he looked at Senior Bone and said, "Senior Bone, I don't know what your intentions are by asking this question. As far as I know, you seem to have a close relationship with that Senior Copper. Could it be that you want to help this traitor?" Yi Shiwen's words immediately attracted the attention of many celestial masters. At this moment, they also understood why Supreme Bone had stepped forward. Although Supreme Bone had said that he was questioning Yi Shiwen, it was not difficult for everyone to guess what he was thinking. Many people had also heard of the friendship between Lord Tong and Supreme Bone, so it was not difficult to guess. "Nonsense, don't slander me. I'm asking why you took so long. As far as I know, it seems that many people saw that you didn't take long to kill Lord Tong." Supreme Bone quickly distanced himself from Yi Shiwen. No matter how good his relationship with Lord Tong was, he could not bear such a big accusation. This was a matter of position. No one dared to make a mistake. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. If it was related to the escape of the Moon City Lord, then the consequences would be unpredictable. Even the Sky City Lord could not protect him. "Does how much time I spend have anything to do with you?" Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "The so-called many people, how many people are there? But forget it, since you want to ask, then I'll tell you. Why did I take so long to come back? It's because I was attacked by the Moon City Lord." As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, there was a burst of whispers. That was because that person was none other than the Moon City Lord. The Moon City Lord had been easily taken down by a middle heavenly venerable. However, this didn't damage his prestige. It only made the middle heavenly venerable even more frightening. No one would think that the Moon City Lord was easy to deal with. At this time, everyone finally understood why Yi Shiwen had left for so long. Chapter 35-38. Everyone came to a sudden realization. If he was ambushed by the Moon City Lord, then everything made sense because that person was none other than the Moon City Lord. Given the strength of the Moon City Lord, it was normal for Yi Shiwen to take so much time to return. Even Yi Shiwen being able to escape successfully was a very fortunate thing in itself. Hearing this, the middle heavenly master and the others were nervous at first, but immediately relaxed. Obviously, they were also very clear about what kind of terrifying existence the Moon City Lord represented. Ordinary heavenly masters would simply die if they encountered an existence above the 9th realm. It was already very amazing that Yi Shiwen could escape and ascend to heaven. Even if you want to lie, it's too fake. With your strength, you can actually survive after encountering the Moon City Lord? "I don't believe it," said Supreme Bone with a sneer. Many people couldn't help but reveal a somewhat suspicious look when they heard Supreme Bone's words. Yes, Yi Shiwen was ambushed by the Moon City Lord, but he returned unscathed. This matter itself was a bit strange. Yi Shiwen didn't care at all. He just said, "Supreme Bone, do you think that others are as useless as you just because you're useless? Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that others can't do it. Judging others by your own standards, you're only at this level. Presumptuous." Supreme Bone suddenly widened his eyes. When he looked at Yi Shiwen again, his expression was full of fierceness. The anger that he had been holding back until now had all erupted at once. "If you have any dissatisfaction, just come to me directly. There's no need to say weird things here. You'll know after a fight that a useless person will always be a useless person. You're only at this level." Yi Shiwen just sneered at Supreme Bone and said, seeing that the two heavenly masters were almost on the verge of breaking out into a great battle, the emperors behind the heavenly masters began to be on tenterhooks. Even if they knew that under such circumstances, they basically wouldn't be affected, but just imagining the scene was extremely frightening. "Shut up. What are the two of you doing? Seeing that the expedition to Moon City is imminent, are the two of you going to fight each other? Do you want to let the people of the demonic Tao era laugh at us?" Middle Heavenly Venerate finally slapped the armrest of his throne and shouted. Suddenly, all the heavenly venerates quietened down. Although the middle heavenly venerate had only been in his position for a short time, he had already established his prestige. After all, he had been the Eastern heavenly venerate for many years. No one dared to not give him face. Reporting to Middle Celestial Master, it's not that I want to argue with him. He disappeared for such a long time inexplicably, and now that he's back, he says that he was ambushed by the City Lord of Moon City. I can tell that he's talking nonsense. Look at him. He doesn't look like he's been through a big battle. It's very suspicious that he's rushing back at this time. Perhaps he's already been captured by the people of the Devil Era and has lost his mind under a spell, said Supreme Bone fiercely, his eyes fixed on Yishiwen. Many celestial masters sucked in a breath of cold air. It was not because of Yishiwen, but because of Supreme Bone. The accusation in his words was getting more and more ruthless. If it were to be realized, it would be terrible. There would probably be a deep hatred between the two sides. However, to everyone's surprise, Yishiwen just sneered and did not refute. There was even a hint of ridicule in his eyes, as if he was looking at a clown. In the face of such a serious accusation by Supreme Bone, the Middle Heavenly Venerate was also noncommittal. If it was said that Yishiwen would be in cahoots with the City Lord of Moon City, let alone him, even all the Celestial Masters would not believe it. Previously, there was such a big conflict between Yishiwen and the City Lord of Moon City. The son of the City Lord of Moon City and his most trusted subordinates had all died in Yishiwen's hands. The hatred between the two sides was as deep as the sea. How could they be in cahoots? However, the other thing that Supreme Bone mentioned was not impossible. With the means of the Devil Era, it was not impossible. The key problem was that Yishiwen had been gone for so long, and he said that he had encountered the City Lord of Moon City. Since he had encountered the City Lord of Moon City, how could he return unscathed? It was not that he underestimated Yishiwen, but as someone at the same level, he was too clear about the means of the City Lord of Moon City. Although Yishiwen was not his opponent, it was too easy for him to deal with ordinary celestial masters. It was not a problem at all. Everyone's eyes turned to Yishiwen. How could they not think of the problem that the Middle Heavenly Venerate thought of? In the end, Yishiwen was on a diet. If Yishiwen had returned miserably, or even if only a trace of his spirit had escaped, it would be very normal. No one would doubt that after encountering the City Lord of Moon City, even if a trace of his spirit had escaped, it would be very fortunate. Everyone wanted to see how he would explain this matter. In the face of everyone's gaze, Yishiwen just smiled faintly and said, "Are you done?" When Supreme Bone saw Yishiwen looking over, he just glared at him fiercely and said, "Let's see how you quibble. Do you think there is no smart person here?" Supreme Bone knew that it was difficult to really do anything to Yishiwen with just these verbal doubts without any evidence. However, for him, there was no need to do anything to Yishiwen. He only needed to plant the seeds of doubt in everyone's hearts, and that would be enough. Sometimes, there is no need for evidence for some things. It would be enough as long as there was enough suspicion. As he thought of this, his heart was incomparably happy. Ever since he learned that his good friend had died in Yishiwen's hands, the anger in his heart could not be contained. This had nothing to do with the camp, but it was a friendship of life and death. Many celestial masters of the Fortune God dynasty could even become close friends with celestial master experts of the ancient era. This was the so-called mutual understanding. Quibble? Why do I need to quibble? I originally didn't want to say much, but since you insist, then I won't hide it from everyone. Yishiwen said slowly, "Everyone knows that I killed Copperzune first. Then I met the City Lord of Moon City and severely injured him. Finally, he escaped. As for why I've only appeared after so long, it's because I've been recuperating. I've only recovered recently." Yishiwen's words finally caused a huge uproar. Everyone was completely in an uproar because this was completely different from what they had imagined. It was not that Yishiwen had escaped from the Moon City Lord, but that he had severely injured the Moon City Lord. At this time, everyone finally remembered that Yishiwen had never said that he had escaped from the Moon City Lord. He only said that he had encountered the Moon City Lord's ambush. It was just that everyone was automatically dragged into the matter of Yi Shiwen's escape. This was also the most likely result that they could think of. As for Yi Shiwen severely injuring the Moon City Lord, it was simply unbelievable. It should be known that even the Sun City Lord, Southern Tianzuan, and Northern Tianzuan dared not say that they could easily injure the Moon City Lord without paying a sufficient price. Of course, when Yi Shiwen said that he had to recuperate, they had also ignored it. Compared to severely injuring the Moon City Lord, such a short period of recuperation was nothing. It was as if there was no price to pay. What they did not know was that Yi Shiwen had indeed suffered serious injuries and almost died. If not for the other fortuitous encounters in the Seven Absolute City, perhaps he would have to recuperate for tens of thousands of years to recover. After the shock, everyone's first reaction was disbelief. This kind of thing was too ridiculous. As a heavenly master and an emperor, they were all extreme powerhouses. Countless years ago, before they had become extreme powerhouses, they had already created countless miracles and were known as mythical existences. However, that was before they had attained the Tao. After attaining the Tao, one would know the difference between one realm and another. Not to mention the difference between an ordinary heavenly master and the Moon City Lord. Many people were already doubtful that Yi Shiwen could safely escape from the Moon City Lord, let alone severely injuring the Moon City Lord. This was not a miracle. It was simply a myth. A myth that belonged to the heavenly master realm. Ha ha ha. Martial Master, I think you're also crazy. How could you say such brainless things? Just by yourself? You can also injure the Moon City Lord. Who do you think you are? Supreme Bone suddenly laughed. In his opinion, this was a sign that Yi Shiwen had lost his composure under his coercion. Seriously injuring the Moon City Lord? Why didn't he say that he had killed the Moon City Lord? In any case, it was all very ridiculous. He could brag however he wanted. Regarding this issue, even the Middle Heavenly Master could not help but reveal a suspicious look. This was no longer something that could be explained by just fighting someone of a higher level. The Moon City Lord was an existence of the same level as him. How could he be so easily injured? In the face of Supreme Bone's ridicule and everyone's suspicious gazes, Yi Shiwen still walked unhurriedly to the center of the venue. He became the focus of everyone's attention and said, "Of course I know what this means. However, I'll say it again. What a good-for-nothing like you can't do doesn't mean that I can't either. In order to seriously injure the Moon City Lord, I have also paid a huge price. That's why I've been recuperating during this period of time. It's very simple for everyone to investigate this matter. I don't believe that our Fortune God dynasty has no undercover agents in the Devil Era. As long as we mobilize our undercover agents to investigate, we will be able to find out. The Moon City Lord was seriously injured and will definitely require a large number of heavenly treasures to heal. If we investigate in this direction, we will naturally find out the truth." Yi Shiwen spoke in all seriousness, and his tone was full of confidence. It did not seem like he had said such words at the last minute. Chapter 35-39. Impossible. How could you do it? Supreme Bone exclaimed in disbelief. In reality, he did not believe in such a thing at all. It was no better than believing that the martial epoch would be destroyed tomorrow. Something as absurd as that. His first reaction was that Yi Shiwen could not have done such a thing. How did you do such a thing? You want us to believe you with empty words? Don't even think about it, said Supreme Bone, gnashing his teeth. He did not believe what Yi Shiwen said at all. As for how I did it, that's my secret. I don't think I need to tell anyone about this, said Yi Shiwen indifferently. If you want to know whether it's true or not, just send someone to investigate. Yi Shiwen looked at this Supreme Bone coldly. This Supreme Bone had made things difficult for him time and time again, which made him want to kill him. Supreme Bone did not question him from a righteous standpoint at all. He was simply doing it for his own selfish desires. Such a person would probably continue to cause trouble behind the scenes in the future. Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, many people actually began to believe him. This was because this matter could be said with empty words, but it was actually very easy to prove it. Just like how the demonic epoch had planted a spy in the Fortune God dynasty, The Fortune God dynasty had also planted a spy in the demonic epic. This was very normal, and everyone knew about it. It was just that no one knew who the spy was. Even if the spy of the Fortune God dynasty in the demonic epic was not very high, it was actually very simple to verify such things. There was no difficulty at all. Yishuan would not lie about this unless he was crazy. After all the impossible things were revealed, then the remaining things could only be the truth, no matter how ridiculous they were. However, no one could figure out what method Yishuan had used to achieve such a feat. It was simply impossible for Yishuan to achieve such a feat by relying on his own strength. It was no different from a fantasy story. With such a difference in strength, even if the Moon City Lord revealed any fatal flaws, it could instantly turn into a fatal trap. There was no such thing as a horse losing its front hooves. Therefore, in their opinion, Yishuan was likely to have used some kind of formation, enchantment, or means left behind from the ancient era. That was how he managed to severely injure the Moon City Lord, allowing him to take advantage of the situation in the end. Their conjecture was close to the truth. Yishuan had indeed used a treasure from the Talisman Tao era to finally defeat the Moon City Lord. He had not taken advantage of the situation, but had gone through a bloody battle to finally achieve such a feat, however. This was his secret. He didn't want to expose the supreme ancestral symbol, so he didn't explain much. This was his secret, and he didn't need to explain it to others. How many of the Empyreans present didn't have their own secrets? He didn't have to say it, but he still said it in the end. There was only one reason. He wanted to fight for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. If he wanted to become an Eastern Empyrean, strength, experience, and contributions were all indispensable. His greatest weakness was his lack of experience. Although he was confident in his strength, that didn't mean he had much of an advantage. As such, he could only rely on his contributions. Previously, he had helped the Middle Heavenly Venerate destroy the Seventh Gold era. That was only one of the aids, and it wasn't enough for his contributions to leap above everyone else. This time, severely injuring the Moon City Lord was enough to leave a mark in his contribution book. It should be known that this was the Moon City Lord. Severely injuring him was more of a contribution than killing a few Empyreans. Because killing a few Empyreans couldn't change the fundamental gap, but severely injuring a top strategic level expert like the Moon City Lord was enough to change the outcome of a battle to a large extent. Naturally, it was a great contribution. Unfortunately, it wasn't killing him. Otherwise, the contribution would be great. Yishuan was even prepared to expose the fact that he had destroyed an era if necessary. These things were easy to investigate. They were all contributions that couldn't be denied even if they wanted to. Everything was just to compete for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Once he took the position, it would naturally bring many benefits. When the Middle Heavenly Venerate heard Yishuan's explanation, a gratified look flashed in his eyes. Although he didn't doubt Yishuan, it was just as Venerable Bone had thought before. If Yishuan couldn't produce evidence to prove his innocence, then many things would become troublesome. Now that Yishuan said this and wasn't afraid of being investigated, it was obviously true. This would add a heavy stroke to Yishuan's competition for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Among so many people who were interested in competing for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate, he naturally hoped that one of his own could take the position. So far, he was the one in charge of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate's affairs. However, such a situation couldn't last long, and others couldn't allow such a situation to exist for long. If Yishuan took the position, then it would also be a good thing for him to lead the entire Fortune God dynasty. It would be a help. If that's the case, then it's indeed true. Suddenly, the West Heavenly Venerate said, but she frowned slightly. According to the information from the spies I buried in the Moon City, I really didn't see the Moon City Lord. Based on the Moon City Lord's temper, if he escaped, he would definitely return to the Moon City. I was very puzzled at first, but now I understand the reason. He was seriously injured. It's a pity that I couldn't kill him. Yishuan felt the goodwill of the West Heavenly Venerate. In fact, the West Heavenly Venerate had helped him twice. with the West Heavenly Venerate's words as a footnote. Even if Venerable Bone wanted to jump around, it would be impossible. After all, no matter how arrogant and domineering he was, it was nothing in front of the West Heavenly Venerate. Yishuin turned his head and saw that the West Heavenly Venerate was just indifferent, as if the person who had just spoken up for Yishuin and settled a possible dispute was not her. Everyone was suddenly speechless, especially the Venerable Bone. Even though he hated Yishuin to the core, there was no way he could say anything. If they were still skeptical at first, now that the West Heavenly Venerate had proven Yishuin's words, the credibility was much higher. Even if they had doubts, they had to at least wait until they found evidence that the Moon City Lord was not injured before they could question Yishuin again. However, judging from the current situation, this was unlikely because Yishuin must have dared to say so because he was confident. They couldn't really check a Heavenly Venerate like Yishuin inside and out just because of a few words of doubt. This would inevitably cause panic. After everyone accepted this fact, the doubts in their hearts grew deeper because they were even more curious about how Yishuin could escape unscathed after severely injuring the Moon City Lord. It was not difficult for everyone to guess that the Moon City Lord was definitely not just seriously injured, but on the verge of death. The reason was very simple. Based on the character of the Moon City Lord, if he was not really on the verge of death, how could he let Yishuin go so easily? He would only let Yishuin go if he really had no strength left. How did Yishuin do it? What kind of trump card was he hiding? It was just that at this point, many people seemed to finally remember that they knew very little about Yishuin from the beginning because Yishuin's rise was too fast. For the Heavenly Venerates, who often measured things in tens of thousands of years, Yishuin's rise was almost overnight. Yishuin's name had spread throughout the world for the first time. In fact, it had even alarmed the Heavenly Masters when he had slaughtered the heaven-devouring Demon Emperor who had already entered the Heavenly Master realm. Everyone had thought that a new member would join their ranks. However, he had been slaughtered instead. Moreover, he was slaughtered by an Emperor Lord. This immediately aroused the anger of countless Heavenly Venerables. This was a provocation to the entire group of Heavenly Venerables. Then, he became a Heavenly Venerable at lightning speed, and his cultivation base soared like a rocket. For the Heavenly Venerates, this was only something that happened more than 10,000 years ago. In such a short period of time, it could be seen as his rise overnight. It was so fast that they were unprepared and did not have enough time to understand Yishuin. Just like that, he rushed into their ranks without the slightest precaution and even rushed all the way. No matter what method he used to severely injure the Moon City Lord, there was no doubt that he had the strength to defeat a powerful Sixth Realm Heavenly Venerate like Copper Lord. Moreover, he had just entered the Heavenly Venerate realm more than 10,000 years ago. This made many Heavenly Venerates suddenly realize something that they had originally overlooked. Because of the amazing strength that Yishuin had displayed, it even made them forget that Yishuin had only become a Heavenly Venerate more than 10,000 years ago. If this number of years was included, then the strength and potential that Yishuin had displayed was really too shocking. It was simply unimaginable to what extent such a super powerhouse could grow in the future. Most importantly, this could only happen in a short period of time. Of course, they still did not know that Yishuin already possessed combat power comparable to the Seventh Realm. Otherwise, they would probably be hopping mad. Yishuin was not afraid to reveal this. It was true that the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind, but he had already grown up now. What kind of wind could blow him down? However, there was no need to. It was also a good choice to hide his Seventh Realm strength as a trump card. At this time, one more trump card might be a higher chance of winning in the future. All right, let's not talk about this issue anymore. As for whether it is true or not, I will investigate it. Next, let's continue to discuss the matter of sending troops to Moon City. The Middle Heavenly Venerate finally spoke and made the final decision. Chapter 3540. Everyone's attention finally returned. What happened to Yishuin was just an interlude. The main character at this stage was none other than capturing Moon City. Every day that Moon City was in the hands of the ancient era led by the Demon Path era, the situation would worsen. Now it was time to take it back. Now, I will personally lead the Middle Army into the First Legion. Western Heavenly Venerate, Southern Heavenly Venerate, and Northern Heavenly Venerate will lead the armies into the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Legions respectively. The reinforcements sent by the other divine cities will be formed into the 5th Legion, led by the Sun City Lord. The troops brought by Spacetime Heavenly Venerate will be formed into the reinforcements and await orders. The Middle Heavenly Venerate easily divided the major forces into several legions, according to the different forces, and commanded them separately. Everyone seemed to have expected this, so they weren't surprised and nodded in succession. Yi Shiwen watched all of this. This was different from the last expedition. The last time, the 10 divine cities had joined forces to exclude the great heavenly venerates. But this time, the great heavenly venerates were in charge, and the reinforcements sent by the divine cities could only be formed into one legion. Although this was also related to the fact that Moon City had been heavily injured by the heaven-splitting devil axe during the last expedition, it could be seen that the dominant position had completely changed. Although they wanted to reclaim Moon City, the 10 divine cities had completely lost their right to speak. Of course, this was a good thing for Yi Shiwen, who stood on the side of the great heavenly venerates, especially since he was in the Middle Heavenly Venerate camp. Even if he became an Eastern Heavenly Venerate in the future and established his own faction, this relationship would not be able to run away. The Middle Heavenly Venerate strengthening his control over the 10 divine cities was also beneficial to him. Moreover, if he became an Upper Eastern Heavenly Venerate in the future, then he would have to consider the overall situation. The Fortune God dynasty was the center, so it definitely had to strengthen its control over places like the 10 divine cities. In recent years, the 10 divine cities had drifted away from the Fortune God dynasty system for too long. This was because the Fortune God dynasty had not produced a strong character for a long time. As a result, the divine cities' control over the 10 great divine cities had gradually weakened, to the point that the 10 great divine cities had joined forces to isolate the Fortune God dynasty's reinforcements from entering the 10 great divine cities. For the Fortune divine dynasty, as the central power, this kind of wandering behavior had already touched the bottom line. This was different from the situation of the Fortune divine dynasty, where the big sects gathered together. Only those who were truly part of this system would understand how terrifying the real, hidden strength of the Fortune Divine Dynasty was. It could even be said that the situation of the Fortune Divine Dynasty was largely laissez-faire. But which big sect dared to be presumptuous? The Fortune Divine Dynasty could easily suppress them. Even the so-called number one sect, Heavenly Taoism, did not dare to really provoke the Fortune Divine Dynasty. The Middle Heavenly Venerate also explained the general arrangements, but in general, with Moon City's situation, they could only take the path of a forceful attack. At this time, there was no possibility of using any tricks. This was also the reason why the 10 great divine cities had never been captured in the past. Because there were no tricks, they could only choose to forcefully attack. And with the defensive power of Moon City, it was simply impossible to capture it. Each legion attacked from different positions, and the backup legion, led by Spacetime Heavenly Venerate, was mainly to guard against the possible appearance of the Ancient Era's reinforcements. In short, this battle could only be won. If they lost again, it would have a huge impact on the morale of the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. Everything has been arranged properly. Everyone disperse. Go and prepare yourselves. We will set off in 10 days. The Middle Heavenly Venerate said. Just as Yishuan was about to leave, suddenly, the Middle Heavenly Venerate's voice sounded in his mind. Revered Marshal, stay for a while. After waiting for the Heavenly Venerates and Emperors to leave, Yi Shiwen went to the Middle Heavenly Venerate's place. At this time, War Master and Mr. Huang were already there, but the other Middle Heavenly Venerate's confidant was not there. Revered Marshal, you're here. There are too many people just now, so we didn't have a good chat. The Middle Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but say, his face full of smiles. This time, the leadership of the entire army was in his hands. Whether it was their respective strength or status, he firmly occupied the title of the first person. Yishuan didn't act pretentious. He sat down cross-legged, and a cloud bed rose under his feet, supporting him. Then, he looked at the middle heavenly venerate and said, "Indeed, Taoist revered marshal, I'm still shocked even now. You actually seriously injured the Moon City Lord." The war master sighed. He and Yishuan had entered the heavenly venerate realm at the same time. Now, he had only entered the heavenly venerate second realm, and this was with the many years of accumulation when he was an emperor. However, Yishuan could hang up and beat a peak emperor like the Moon City Lord. Just thinking about it was incredible. The arrow is knocked on the bow, but it has to be released, Yishuan said calmly. He didn't think that seriously injuring the Moon City Lord was something to be proud of. Only he knew how much he had to pay to fight against the Moon City Lord. Therefore, all of this was just a matter of course. It was not worth showing off at all. But in order to defeat him, you should have also paid a big price, said the middle heavenly venerate. Although Yishuan said it casually, as a person of the same level, how could he not know how difficult it was to deal with the Moon City Lord? In the end, neither of them was able to kill the other. It was very likely that both of them would suffer a great deal of damage. Otherwise, since they had already fought to such an extent, how could they possibly let the other go? There was only one possibility that would result in neither of them being able to do anything to the other in the end, and that was that both of them would be heavily injured to the point where they wouldn't even be able to lift their weapons. However, after suffering such a serious injury, Yishuan could actually recover in a short time. It was either another fortuitous encounter, or he had a trump card that he hadn't used. At his level, although Yishuan had deliberately concealed his own strength, the middle heavenly venerate could still feel that Yishuan had become stronger compared to before. Although he didn't know to what extent Yishuan had become stronger, Yishuan had continuously become stronger in just a short time. Such a speed shocked the middle heavenly venerate. There were heavenly venerates who advanced by leaps and bounds. The so-called enlightenment and ascension were also possible. However, to be able to continue to advance by leaps and bounds was not something that could be explained by ordinary things. Obviously, Yishuan was currently in luck. However, the middle heavenly venerate didn't really take it to heart. Although Yishuan had the means to seriously injure the Moon City Lord, it was only a serious injury. He must have paid a painful price. If one didn't truly reach their level, they wouldn't understand. Moreover, the stronger Yishuan was, the more benefits he would have for his camp. He didn't feel that Yishuan was a threat. "I did pay a big price, but it's better than dying," Yishuan said with a grin. He didn't hide it and just told the truth. Everyone felt touched in their hearts. The subtext of Yishuan's words was that it was only a little better than death. They could more or less imagine the tragedy of that battle. "All right, since you're back, that's enough. The next Moon City battle will be your time to make contributions. The Fortune God dynasty won't be stingy with your rewards," said the middle heavenly venerate. The Fortune God dynasty had been in operation for so many years. Although there hadn't been a ruler for a long time, they had also found an effective operating system. There was naturally a special department to calculate the merits, demerits, rewards, and punishments. Although there might be cases of favoritism, it was still relatively objective in general. Especially you, Wuzun. I also hope that you, or Heavenly Venerate Silver Moon, can become the next Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Therefore, the next battle is very important. As far as I know, there are many people interested in the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Among them, there is no lack of old antiques and old monsters that you can't deal with. Only by completely suppressing them in terms of merits will you have any hope. Do you understand? The middle heavenly venerate stared at Yishuan and revealed a crucial piece of information. It turned out that there were many people who wanted to seize the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate. It wouldn't be easy for Yishuan to become the Eastern Celestial Lord. His qualifications were too shallow, and his strength didn't have an overwhelming advantage. Therefore, The merits he had obtained had become his only bargaining chip. In fact, it was the most important bargaining chip. Yi Shiwen nodded. He was very clear about this point, but he was confident because he still had a trump card that he hadn't used. It was the destruction of the ancient era that was about to die. This was a great contribution to the Fortune God dynasty and even the entire martial arts era. This was enough to make up for his lack of qualifications and strength. Moreover, his current combat strength had already crossed the threshold of a high-level heavenly venerate. It couldn't be said that he was very weak. He was also qualified to sit in the position of Eastern heavenly venerate. However, all of this was not enough. He was only qualified to be one of the competitors, but it didn't mean that he had an overwhelming advantage. What gave him the confidence was the supreme ancestral symbol. At worst, he would just use a cheat. If he really fought, he wouldn't fear anyone. It was just that he would have to pay a painful price. There were some antiques and old monsters that even the middle heavenly venerates feared. He had to be careful. What's left is a bloody battle. Those ancient eras, especially the Devil Dao era, will definitely not be willing to give up Moon City like this. A bloody battle is inevitable. All of you go and prepare. Prepare to depart in 10 days. The middle heavenly venerate gave a few more instructions before sending everyone away. Yi Shiwen hadn't returned for a while. He hurriedly flew towards the human race's encampment. Although it hadn't been a long time, it felt like a lifetime had passed since he had escaped death. Chapter 35-41. When Yi Shiwen returned to the human race's encampment, the human race's Emperor Realm experts were already waiting for him at the top of the encampment. Since Yi Shiwen was not present, the human race's Emperor Realm experts did not participate in the meeting. Although the number of human race's elite army was not small, and there were also a few Emperor Realm experts compared to the entire Fortune God dynasty's army, they were insignificant characters. Without Yi Shiwen's presence, they were not even qualified to be looked at. Therefore, they were not called. If Yi Shiwen did not return in time, the human race's army might sit on the bench until death. Even if they were cannon fodder, the human race's army was actually in a dispensable state. The human race's army was still relatively weak compared to the forces of those truly established great sects and powerful clans. Even if Yi Shiwen had gone all out to enhance the strength and heritage of the human race, there was still a relatively large gap between them. This was something that could only be made up for with time. It was not something that Yi Shiwen could do alone. Greetings, Master. Greetings, Your Honor. The expressions of Bian Xiaoya and the others did not change. They did not know that Yi Shiwen had experienced a life and death battle. In their opinion, it was just their master going out to kill a strong enemy. With the strength of a heavenly master, a battle for a few months or even a few years was nothing. They did not notice the danger at all. Yi Shiwen did not intend to say much. These things were already in the past. There was no need to say it and make them worry. Yi Shiwen nodded and said, "Well, get up. Have you been training the army well recently?" Reporting to Master, we did not dare to relax for even a moment. Bian Xiaoya said, "Well, that's good. Prepare well. We will set off in 10 days to conquer Moon City." Yi Shiwen said, "This is also an opportunity for you to hone yourselves. Although you will have to experience life and death, your cultivation will also benefit greatly. Of course, the most important thing is that this battle is very important to the Fortune God dynasty. If you perform well, there will naturally be a lot of benefits. What mysterious creation pills? This time, there will be an unrestricted supply. As long as you perform well, you can have anything you want," said Yi Shiwen. When his level rose to a certain level, his perspective of the problem was completely different. This battle was not only to recover the Moon City, but it was also a great opportunity to hone and improve the strength of the various armies and many of the younger experts. The more horrifying the battle, the more extraordinary geniuses would rise above the masses and attain supreme merits. At that time, these geniuses could be singled out and fostered with all their might, allowing their cultivations to rise by leaps and bounds. Although it seemed like a lot of wealth would be consumed, it would increase the overall strength of the Fortune God dynasty. Whether it was medicinal pellets, divine weapons, or martial arts manuals, if they could not be used as rewards, they would only be dead objects in the end. Yishuan had seen through this long ago. Therefore, he had never been stingy when it came to rewards for the human race. Even more than half of the benefits he had obtained from the Fortune Divine Capital had fallen into the human race's treasury to be rewarded to the outstanding geniuses of the human race. Only in this way could the human race produce an endless stream of heroes and become a truly great race in the world. The current human race was still too weak. Although many powerful races and sects had come to seek refuge, it would still take a long time for them to completely become one of their own. Even as a heavenly master, Yi Shiwen could not spoil the seedlings through excessive haste. Bian Xiaoye and the others revealed a look of joy. Divine items like the mysterious creation pill were of little use to experts of Yi Shiwen's level. But for emperors like them, it was still a treasure that was difficult to obtain. Not to mention that there were many other divine items that would also be rewarded. As long as one performed outstandingly, there would be no lack of rewards. This was also the method of the higher-ups. If there were not many rewards, how could they make the people below advance bravely? How could the higher-ups of the Fortune God dynasty do something so stupid as to want the horse to run and not eat grass? Come in, I will preach the Tao to you. This time, I have gained some understanding of the Tao, so I can use the last 10 days to preach the Tao to you. Yi Shiwen said. After all, it was still too early. If he could, of course, he hoped to cultivate the body of merit. At that time, even if he encountered the top experts of the Eighth Realm, they would not be able to hurt him. It could be said that he could go to any dangerous place in the world. Even when the New World tree fruit ripened, his martial power would soar to the peak of the Sixth Realm, and his strength would be greatly improved. Unfortunately, 10 days was still too short, but it was still fine if it was just preaching, especially this time. He personally presided over the destruction of the heavenly Tao that was about to be extinguished. In the process, there were many insights, not only about the Tao of death, but also a lot of understanding. Therefore, he did not have to worry about indigestion after swallowing the world tree fruit. His current realm understanding had even penetrated into the seventh realm. As long as he swallowed the world tree fruit, then the improvement of his martial power was just like pushing a boat with the current. It was really too simple. There was a bit of joy on the faces of the few people. A celestial master preaching was not a situation that could be encountered at any time and place. Even Bian Xiaoye, who was close to Yi Shiwen, could not let Yi Shiwen preach at all times. Most of the time, Yi Shiwen would just give a few casual pointers, and there were very few detailed explanations of the Tao. Every time Yi Shiwen preached, their cultivation would improve greatly, and their understanding of the Tao would go further. The three people quickly followed Yi Shiwen back to the space in the depths of the human race's encampment, and sat down respectfully to listen to the preaching. As for those quasi-emperors, they were naturally not qualified to enter. They were not even extreme Tao experts, so they could not listen to the Tao. If they forced themselves to listen, it would only cause their minds to be confused, and their bodies would explode and die. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. In particular, Bian Xiaoye and the other two people who were listening to the preaching felt as if Yi Shiwen had just started, and the preaching had already ended. The time in between had passed too quickly, but in just these short 10 days, they felt that they had gained a lot. Yi Shiwen was already a powerful celestial master of the Sixth Realm, so he naturally had a clear understanding of the extreme Tao of the Emperor Realm. Although everyone's Tao was different, just like there could not be two identical Leave in the world, there were some basic common principles that could still be explained to them. Among them, Bian Xiaoye had gained the most because the mysterious techniques that she cultivated were all taught by Yi Shiwen, so she was naturally very familiar with them. It could almost be said that Yi Shiwen had pointed out a bright path for her, and Yi Shiwen could answer all the questions and problems that she had in cultivation. In addition, her cultivation was the shallowest, so she progressed the fastest at this time. After swallowing a mysterious creation pill that Yi Shiwen rewarded in time, she had already reached the peak of the second realm, and the third realm of the Emperor Realm was just around the corner. After this expedition to Moon City, it was very likely that she would step into the third realm. Seeing Bian Xiaoya's speed of progress, even the Ren Huang and sky-shaking Thunder Emperor felt extremely envious. But they also knew that there was no point in being envious. After all, she had a good master. But even so, they still gained a lot, especially the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor. When he was captured by Yi Shiwen back then, he was more or less dissatisfied. Although Yi Shiwen was stronger than him, it was not to the extent that he was in despair. It was only because of Yi Shiwen's charm that he had no choice but to yield. However, after Yi Shiwen went against the natural order and stepped into the heavenly master realm, all the dissatisfaction in his heart disappeared. As for now, he could only worship Yi Shiwen from the bottom of his heart. The two of them were not on the same level at all. For him, becoming Yi Shiwen's follower was not a bad thing, but a blessing instead. Even back then, he did not expect that he could step into the ranks of the peak emperor realm in more than 10,000 years and become a well-known figure among the many emperors in the world. He could even look up to the heavenly master realm, which was something that he did not dare to think about in the past. Right now, the only thought left in his heart was to willingly submit to Lin Fan. Yi Shiwen stopped preaching and said, 10 days have passed. Go and gather the army. Get ready to go. Yes. Bian Xiaoya and the others quickly received the order and left. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and gazed into the distance. At this time, the entire city had begun to move. After all, the 10 great divine cities weren't ordinary cities. Instead, they were important military towns. They had revealed their true colors at this time. Countless troops began to be mobilized. The residents of a city were obviously used to this. Although Sun City had never been conquered, it had faced many wars. They were already very used to it. However, the scale of the expedition this time was unprecedentedly grand. All kinds of armies covered the sky and covered the earth. All of them were gathered together. For the sake of the expedition, all of them were mobilized. Originally, the entire Sun City was like a huge continent. An ordinary army couldn't cover the sky and land like this. In order to recover the Moon City, this battle could be said to be a victory that they could not afford to lose. The entire Fortune Divine Dynasty's elite forces were gathered here. It was far more than the military strength of any divine city. It could be said that even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit. The previous defeat had shaken the Fortune God Dynasty's image. This battle could not be lost again. All the armies gathered together, and an incomparably large transmission array appeared in the sky. The armies gathered together and entered the transmission array, directly teleporting to the Moon City. Such a large-scale mobilization naturally couldn't be hidden from the ancient era's people in the Moon City. However, this wasn't a surprise attack, and the Fortune Divine Dynasty didn't want to hide it either. They just wanted to openly attack the Moon City with all their might. One battle to establish their prestige. Chapter 3542. Army after army entered the various transmission arrays above Sun City. They disappeared one after another, and a new army appeared one after another. Millions, tens of millions of soldiers disappeared and reappeared, disappeared and reappeared. Every time they teleported an army of this scale, they would have to spend an incalculable amount of wealth. Ordinary, powerful races would feel their hearts ache for a long time just to teleport an army of this size, let alone teleporting such a large army. Just the amount of wealth spent on this alone could make a powerful race go bankrupt. Only the Fortune God Dynasty could support such a terrifying amount of resources. One after another, powerful auras flashed past and entered the transmission array. The true top experts naturally did not need to move with the army. Soon, the human army was assembled. They were all elites of the human race, so they gathered quickly. Under Yi Shiwen's arrangements, the human army entered one of the transmission arrays. Yi Shiwen also entered the transmission array. His vision blurred, and he felt the laws of space forming countless talismans and divine chains around him. Ordinary people couldn't see the specific laws of such a large formation, but Yi Shiwen was different. His eyes were like torches, and he could see through it at a glance. When he reappeared, he was already in a chaotic space. About 10,000 miles away from this chaotic space, a majestic divine city appeared in front of him. This divine city was 70 to 80% similar to Sun City. Only the details were different. That was Moon City, one of the 10 divine cities. The 10 divine cities were built by the fortune god emperor at the same time. Whether it was the style or the various defensive boundaries and formations, they were all the same. It was only after countless years that they developed different styles, which was why they were slightly different. At this time, various terrifying auras soared into the sky from Moon City, covering the sun. Clearly, they had already discovered the fortune god dynasty's expedition army. At this time, the fortune god dynasty's army had also begun to set up camp. This was at least a protracted war, and it was impossible to capture Moon City in a short time. Bien Xiaoya and the others also began to command the human army to set up camp. This was a protracted war. Facing the fortune god dynasty's expedition army, Moon City didn't sit still and wait for death. They had already sent out many armies to harass the fortune god dynasty's army. They couldn't allow the fortune god dynasty's army to set up camp smoothly. They had already started fighting with the fortune god dynasty's vanguard army. Although they had just started fighting, the intensity of the battle was far more intense than the battle inside the fortune divine dynasty. The secret techniques used by the various eras were also different, and there were many traces of magic from the Devil Dao era's experts dancing in the air. There were also the various ancient eras' martial techniques and innate abilities that were completely different from each other. These martial techniques and innate abilities were more than enough to catch the martial epic off guard. Fortunately, these are the fortune divine dynasty's elites among elites. Many of them had been active on the battlefields of the ancient era's martial techniques for many years. Fighting with the various ancient era's experts had already become a habit for them. The battle between the vanguard armies of both sides was mostly led by the emperors of both sides. The heavenly venerables of both sides didn't intervene, or perhaps they felt that it wasn't the time for them to intervene. After the human army set up camp, Yishuan let Bien Xiaoya and the other two take turns to lead a portion of the army to fight the various ancient era's armies that came out of Moon City. This was to accumulate experience in fighting the ancient eras. If they wanted to become the fortune god dynasty's strongest race, they had to go through these battles. Yishuan himself vigilantly watched the entire battlefield. There were some extremely terrifying auras lurking in the entire Moon City, and they were the heavenly venerables of the various ancient eras. Although none of these ancient eras could be compared to the fortune divine dynasty's strength, when all of these ancient era strengths were gathered together, it was a considerable force. However, Yishuan still had absolute confidence that in front of the fortune god dynasty, these ancient eras would be useless no matter how they jumped around. Because these ancient eras wouldn't pay a huge price to defend Moon City to the death. But in order to protect the battlefield's defensive line, the fortune god dynasty could pay a huge price. Because if they didn't take back Moon City, then the price they would pay would be far more than the price they had to pay to defend Moon City to the death, because of this loophole in the defensive line. In this case, according to Yishuan's opinion, no matter how the ancient eras in Moon City jumped around, they were just grasshoppers after autumn, unable to grow. Even so, a cornered rabbit would bite, and a cornered dog would jump over a wall. These ancient eras wouldn't give up willingly. They would inevitably go through a fierce battle, and blood would flow like a river. And this was the opportunity for Yishuan and the others to make meritorious contributions. As time passed, the battle became more and more intense because the fortune god dynasty's army was continuously teleporting over from the transmission array. Slowly, the fortune god dynasty's advantage began to gradually become obvious, and they began to defeat the armies sent by the various ancient eras in Moon City. Under the leadership of Bien Xiaoya and the others, the human army was inseparable from the ancient era's army. Under the leadership of Bien Xiaoya and the others, the human army's morale soared. piercing through the Ancient Era's army several times. Although the Ancient Eras also had experts, they obviously couldn't resist, and there was still a big gap between them. The Ancient Era's army, which was originally able to loiter around the Fortune God Dynasty's army camp, retreated to the vicinity of Moon City in defeat and could only rely on Moon City's support to hold on. The entire front line had been pushed to the vicinity of Moon City. Although Moon City had been captured previously, because of the unexpected method, the entire Moon City's defensive system was still intact. Although there was no way to completely restore the defensive functions in such a short period of time, just the part that was restored was enough to provide cover for the Ancient Era's army outside Moon City. Therefore, the Fortune God Dynasty's army could only linger around Moon City, unable to attack. Of course, now was not the time for the army to attack. The entire Fortune God Dynasty's army was still continuously transmitted through the transmission array. Only when the army arrived would the final attack be launched. After the Ancient Era's defensive line was compressed to the vicinity of Moon City, the Fortune God Dynasty's experts began to move out. Originally, it was just a confrontation between the major armies, but now it had become a competition between experts from both sides. Emperors, and heavenly venerables finally began to fight, probing and exchanging blows with each other. Even Bien Xiaoya and the other two began to find their opponents to fight. This kind of opportunity was very rare for them. For extreme experts, they could already see through the rules of the operation of the laws. After a few battles, they could thoroughly understand the characteristics of these ancient eras. The next time they encountered the same ancient era, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Yishuan only watched from afar and didn't participate in the actual battle. He only occasionally blocked the interference of heavenly venerables for Bien Xiaoya and the others. At this time, only emperors were directly fighting on the battlefield. The heavenly venerables were fighting from afar, bombarding each other with laws. There had never been a moment when the heavenly Tao was as clear as it was now, because the top experts were fighting, and every time a top expert attacked, the heavenly Tao would appear. The heavenly Tao would appear more clearly. Yishuan also participated in the battle between heavenly venerables from time to time. Fighting from this position, unless the difference in strength was too great, it was difficult to determine the winner, especially when these heavenly venerables fought with each other from time to time. From time to time, all kinds of incomparably terrifying supernatural abilities and phenomena appeared. Looking from afar, it was incomparably terrifying. All the Empyreans were conserving their energy, waiting for the great battle to begin. Everyone knew that the ones who would decide everything in the end would be these Empyreans. Only when these people determined the victor and loser would the outcome of both sides be decided. Yishuan was the same. He was basically escorting the human race army, unlike Bien Xiaoya and the others who personally went into battle. Finally, the Fortune God Dynasty's army was finally in position. There was no longer a steady stream of soldiers flying out from the transmission array. The real battle was about to begin, and it could break out at any moment. One after another, the war fortresses were withdrawn. One after another, the specially cultivated war beasts flew out like huge planets, preparing for battle. Army after army gathered. More often than not, when an army gathered, apart from the sounds of metal clashing against each other, there was actually not a single sound. They were all elites among elites. Rays of light flickered in the chaos. It was the activation of ancient array formations. They were all extremely ancient array formations that were replicated here. They were all left behind by the great experts of ancient times. At this time, dazzling light flashed. There was a sea of people everywhere, covering the sky and earth. In fact, after everyone had tested each other, the flowing sea of blood had stimulated the ferocious nature exuding from many people's bones. They were just rubbing their palms, preparing for the big battle. Everyone attack. Crush them. Following the order of the middle heavenly venerables, troops after troops began to charge. Countless fierce beasts roared, carrying the riders on their backs as they charged. No one spoke. There was only the cold sound of metal clashing, but everyone's blood was boiling. A real bloody battle was about to begin, and at this time, the heavenly venerables and emperors also began to advance. Chapter 35:43. Woo woo woo. A bugle horn made from an unknown beast's horn sounded. The entire chaos space rumbled like muffled thunder. This was the bugle horn of the army's march. The entire chaos space was stirred up by this bugle horn. This was a very frightening scene. The army was like layers upon layers of dark clouds that were connected together. The primal chaos was completely covered, and it was like an overwhelming sea that swept up monstrous waves that could destroy anyone who dared to stand in front of these monstrous waves. Even heavenly venerables had to retreat in front of this monstrous wave. At the level of heavenly venerables, they basically disregarded the advantage of numbers. But when a number reached this level, the power that could be displayed with the help of military formations was something that even heavenly venerables had to be wary of, not to mention emperors. Facing it head-on would mean death. Amidst the deafening battle cries, the million-strong army of the human clan set off one after another. They summoned their mounts, including strange beasts and ferocious beasts. The million-strong army was like a huge cloud covering the sky and the sun. It was as if countless demons were galloping towards the human clan with countless iron hooves. The best way to attack a city was to pin down the enemy from several directions. Focus on one direction, then open up a breakthrough point, then spread out into an area, gradually gaining the upper hand. But this time, the Fortune God Dynasty's army was much larger than the Ancient Era's army. They had the upper hand and didn't even need to restrain the Fortune God Dynasty's army. They launched an all-out attack from every direction. Under such circumstances, battle cries filled the air. Even an ancient city like the Moon City trembled in fear under this kind of attack. At the forefront of the human race army were Yi Xuan, Bian Xiaoya, the human emperor, the Thunder Emperor, and the others. They were there to block those experts to prevent the human race's army from suffering heavy casualties. Although casualties were inevitable under this kind of siege, Yi Xuan didn't want the million-strong army to suffer heavy casualties. These were the elites of the human race, and also the source of the human race's vitality. Only those who were selected out of thousands were qualified to enter this army. Under this kind of attack, the army that was roaming around Moon City was instantly routed. This was a massacre, a one-sided massacre. The Ancient Era's army was also very elite, but in the face of the Fortune God Dynasty's overwhelming army, they were nothing. The Ancient Era's army around Moon City was completely wiped out. The Ancient Era's army was either annihilated or retreated to Moon City, using Moon City's defenses to resist. It was a bloody scene. Those who were killed in the primal chaos directly fell into the primal chaos. No one knew where they fell to. There were no corpses or bones left because the primal chaos had no bottom. In the face of such a cruel war, even the many powerful creatures living in the primal chaos didn't dare to approach. Although they might not be very intelligent, they also knew that they shouldn't approach under such circumstances. Otherwise, they would really be courting death. Any small army on the periphery could wipe them out. As the human race army advanced, they also encountered several armies. Yi Xuan adhered to his original plan and didn't directly intervene. He only increased the protection for the human race army so that they could fight with ease and wouldn't be easily injured. As for Yi Xuan himself, he was vigilant against celestial master experts that might appear at any time. Even though he had entered the seventh realm, he wasn't strong enough to run amok on this battlefield. In other places, the appearance of one or two celestial masters was enough to affect the entire war situation. But here, celestial master experts constantly appeared. This time, both sides had brought many celestial master experts. Yi Xuan had indirectly fought with them many times before. In front of Yi Xuan, there were densely packed figures. The human clan's million-strong army blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Similarly, the Ancient Era's army also blotted out the sky and covered the earth. They stood densely on the city wall of the Moon City. Boom! With a loud sound of thunder, countless talismans flew out and turned into terrible light. It directly swept out a beam of light towards Yi Shiwen, who was flying above the entire army. Just as it was about to hit Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes. That beam of light instantly dissipated in front of his eyes and turned into nothingness. It seemed as if a terrifying force had made this beam of light disappear into nothingness. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw that above the city walls, an incomparably huge battle fortress slowly emerged. It was this battle fortress that blocked Yi Shiwen's way. This battle fortress was obviously produced by the Fortune God dynasty. It was originally left in Moon City, but now it had become a defensive weapon used by the ancient era to block the Fortune God dynasty's army. If it weren't for Yi Shiwen just now, but an ordinary Emperor Bian Xiaoye and the others would definitely die if they were hit. Even War Elder, who had entered the Heavenly Master Realm, would be seriously injured if he was hit. Yi Shiwen's combat power was too terrifying. He had entered the high-level Heavenly Master Realm. Ordinary means were useless against him. The armies of both sides were locked in a fierce battle near the city walls. The human race army was unparalleled elites, but the experts of the ancient era were not bad either. The human race army was packed with people, and the ancient era's army was the same. Even with Bian Xiaoye and the others leading, it was difficult to move forward. Almost as soon as they broke out of the encirclement, the emperors on the opposite side immediately followed to block Bian Xiaoye and the others. The collision of extreme powerhouses could be seen everywhere. Yi Shiwen's gaze turned towards the battle fort that was protected by the enchantment barrier. That attack had consumed more than half of its power, so it needed time to replenish its energy. However, the other cannon muzzles and matrix arrays were fully activated. All kinds of dreadful beams of light swept out. The human army would die if they were hit by the beams of light. They would get injured even if they were just grazed. It could be said that because of his carelessness, Moon City was handed over to the ancient era. The Moon City Lord, who fled in panic, had committed a capital crime. He was not sentenced to death, but was only suppressed for millions of years. That was already a light punishment. Facing this situation, Yi Shiwen finally couldn't stand it anymore. He spread his palm, and thousands of rays of light bloomed from his palm. Within the light, the martial elder seal rose up, rotated, and expanded against the wind. It grew bigger and bigger, and fiercely smashed towards the battle fortress. Boom! The martial elder seal smashed into the boundary in front of the battle fortress. This boundary was connected to the entire defense system of Moon City. Yi Shiwen's thunderous attack was actually nullified by the entire boundary. This was the power of the Moon City's defense system, but now it had become the biggest obstacle in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen could clearly see that on the other side of the barrier, there was a mocking look on the faces of the ancient era's experts. They seemed to be laughing at the fact that the people of the Fortune God dynasty were ultimately stopped by their own defensive system. Yi Shiwen only sneered and looked at these people indifferently. He looked up and saw that the defense of the entire Moon City had been activated, and it was devouring a large number of the Fortune God dynasty's troops at every moment. At this time, the Heavenly Venerables had no choice but to take action. After all, these Heavenly Venerables were the attackers of all the arrays and boundaries, especially for a divine city-level city like Moon City. Even if only a small portion of the array and boundaries were activated, it was still a huge threat to the Fortune God dynasty's army. They had to be dealt with. The defensive boundary of Moon City was very troublesome even for Heavenly Venerables, let alone emperors. It was the same for the human race army. If no Heavenly Venerables intervened, they might never be able to break the defense. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen moved. In an instant, he flew in front of the Moon City's defensive barrier. Amidst the mocking smiles of the ancient era's experts, he made his move. A touch of golden light flickered. Then, they were horrified to find that the defensive barrier in front of them, which seemed indestructible, had completely collapsed in an instant. It had completely collapsed. It wasn't just the defensive boundary in front of them. Even the defensive boundary in this area had collapsed. Because Moon City was too huge, even the defensive boundary couldn't truly be integrated into one. Instead, it was divided into different areas. Although it could be linked with the defensive boundary in other areas, it was ultimately not a unified whole. When it was attacked by the upper limit of the defensive boundary, it suddenly collapsed. In Yi Shiwen's hand, there was a mass of golden hepta qi revolving. Even the defensive boundary of Moon City couldn't withstand a single blow in front of this mass of golden hepta qi. This was the 7th Gold Era's origin qi. Its power was simply unimaginable. Seeing this scene, the Ancient Era's army was almost scared to death. This defensive boundary was their guarantee of safety. Without this boundary, it was completely conceivable that they would be drowned by the human race army. Although there were many Ancient Era's army garrisoned in this area, it was still much smaller compared to the million-strong human race army. Even though they were all elites, when they encountered such a sudden change, their greatest reliance crumbled, and they immediately felt like dying. On the contrary, the morale of the human race army was greatly boosted. With such a powerful heavenly venerate leading them, they would definitely be invincible. After breaking the defensive boundary, the first thing Yishiwen did was to face the greatest threat to the human race army, the battle fortress. But he saw that the rotating mass of golden hepta qi in his hand grew bigger and bigger, and instantly turned into a long sword, flashing with the light of golden hepta. Engraved with ancient patterns, Yishiwen grasped it, and then chopped down. Rumble! The battle fortress couldn't resist at all, and instantly turned into nothingness. Chapter 35:44. It wasn't that it had crumbled, but it had completely disappeared, turning into an atomic form and disappearing. Although this battle fortress was terrifying and could even pose a fatal threat to low-level heavenly venerables, it was still a dead object in the end. The ones who truly ruled over the Fortune Divine dynasty weren't them, but the high-level heavenly venerables. This was because there was a limit to what they could do, unlike high-level heavenly venerables who had almost no limit. Yishiwen's golden hepta qi attack was too horrifying. It directly crushed the opponent using the source of the law. If one wasn't a heavenly venerables, they would be turned into nothingness. It was impossible to resist. After Yishiwen broke through this battle fortress, the human army rushed in and killed their way in. Without the protection of the enchantment and the firepower support of the battle fortress, the defending Ancient Era army couldn't hold on and was beaten back. They didn't have much morale to begin with. At this time, it was a one-sided massacre. They couldn't stop it at all. When the morale of an army was high, even the gods in the sky would kill them. But when the morale of an army was low, even a pig would be able to chase them away. This was the situation now. We open a gap, great. At this time, in the Central Army's battle formation, the Middle Heavenly Venerables saw that Yishiwen easily broke through the enchantment and took the lead. Yishiwen led the human army into battle. Even the War Venerables led millions of soldiers into battle. But he didn't move because he knew that as the commander of the army, he couldn't be impulsive. Although it was fun to kill his way into the battle formation, it was also very dangerous. And if something happened to him, the entire army would be in danger. He couldn't take risks easily. Moreover, he also had his opponents. He also had something he needed to do, which was to mobilize the Good Fortune Universe map and be ready to fight against the heaven-splitting demon axe at any time. This was the decisive power that could change the situation of this battle. Without the heaven-splitting demon axe, just the power of the 10 divine cities could flatten the Moon City. Their fortune god dynasty wouldn't even have a chance to take action. Therefore, he had to guard this ultimate power. As long as they had the creation universe map in their hands, it would be impossible for anything to happen in this battle. However, Yishiwen had taken the lead and destroyed a part of the barrier. It could be considered as a good start. However, he knew that this was just the beginning. These experts of the Ancient Era wouldn't be willing to be captured without putting up a fight. Just by taking down Moon City, they had already reaped a huge harvest. They had plundered all the wealth and resources accumulated over the years. Naturally, they wanted to rely on Moon City to open more gaps. If they could destroy the martial epic in the end, the benefits they would obtain would be unimaginable. Even if it was just for this, they would fight to the death without retreating. If it was an ordinary satellite city, it wouldn't matter if it was occupied, but Moon City was different. The Fortune Divine dynasty would never give it up. Hence, it was impossible for them to hold on. The only difference was the price they had to pay to recapture Moon City. The Middle Heavenly Venerate's expression was indifferent. He saw all the casualties in front of him, but it couldn't shake his determination. This was because he knew that these were necessary sacrifices. If Moon City fell into enemy hands for a long time, then the countless creatures of the entire martial epic would suffer. Sure enough, just as the Middle Heavenly Venerable had expected, these ancient era's experts wouldn't give up. Yi Shiwen had just broken through the Moon City's barrier defense line, and had just broken into the Moon City when a figure had already blocked his path. A black light flashed, and a figure rushed in front of Yi Shiwen at lightning speed. It turned into a terrifying attack and slashed at Yi Shiwen's head. At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blocked this terrifying attack. Dang! There was a sound like gold and iron colliding. A terrifying shockwave bounced back towards both sides. Yi Shiwen didn't move at all, but the figure that rushed over was directly sent flying. At this moment, Yi Shiwen finally saw clearly what it was. He saw that it was a figure whose entire body was made of crystal. It seemed to have turned into a crystal domain around him. The crystal epic's heavenly venerate. A lot of information flashed in Yi Shiwen's mind, and he immediately recognized the origin of this figure. In fact, there were many living beings in the martial epic, and his origin was the crystal epic. This was a glorious civilization that once existed in the early ancient era. In that era, everything in the world was made of crystals, and they had their own unique cultivation methods. This was also inherited by the crystal life forms in the martial epic. Moreover, from the situation of fighting with the crystal life forms in the martial epic, these special life forms were completely different from flesh and blood life forms like the human race. Their physical cultivation was tyrannical and terrifying. State your name. My subordinates don't kill nameless people, Yi Shiwen said faintly. The other party was also a heavenly venerate, so Yi Shiwen was willing to give him a chance to state his name. As for the physical cultivation that the crystal life forms were best at, the heavenly venerate was not afraid at all, because in this aspect he was also fearless. Compared to Yi Shiwen's indifference, the crystal epic heavenly venerate opposite him seemed much more serious. Just now, he attacked with all his strength and didn't hold back at all. This was also the fighting style that their epic was best at. However, Yi Shiwen, who was ambushed, only raised his hand and blocked his strongest attack. This couldn't help but shock a top expert like him. Heavenly Crystal Emperor, said the crystal epic heavenly venerate. Who are you? Martial epic Wuzun, said Yi Shiwen. Okay, I will remember your name, said the heavenly crystal emperor. The crystal body on his body began to emit a dazzling light. However, he only heard Yi Shiwen shout, "There is no need, because you will die in my hands soon." Arrogant, the heavenly crystal emperor roared. In just an instant, he launched an attack. Like a crystal lightning, he crossed the entire chaos, and in an instant, he had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. Countless patterns of the Great Path appeared on the body of the heavenly crystal emperor. It was almost able to shake the sky and explode. It was as brilliant as the sun. His hands shook slightly, and a long crystal stick appeared. Endless brilliance appeared on the stick, and it instantly slammed down. Oomph! Yi Shiwen coldly snorted. His fists rumbled like two mountains and directly bombarded the long crystal stick. Boom! A terrifying shock wave instantly blasted out, forming a terrifying storm that swept out. The powerful recoil directly swept towards the two, more than 1,000 times more terrifying than before. Yi Shiwen's body didn't move. Such an attack couldn't move him at all. On the other side, the heavenly crystal emperor flew out instantly. Dense cracks appeared on his crystal-like body. How is it possible? The heavenly crystal emperor's eyes were filled with shock. It should be known that his physical body was tyrannical and his cultivation base was all in it. Coupled with his extraordinary talent, the Crystal Era had a great advantage in this aspect. With his cultivation base as a level 6 Heavenly Venerate, even a level 7 Heavenly Venerate would find it difficult to injure his physical body. It was just that he didn't expect that he would suffer a heavy injury when he just fought with Yi Shiwen. If his physical cultivation was a monster, then Yi Shiwen in front of him was simply a monster among monsters. You are best at physical cultivation. Now that you are suppressed by me, let's see if you have the ability to overturn the heavens. Yi Shiwen sneered. The Heavenly Crystal Emperor was naturally very strong. He was afraid that ordinary 7th Realm Heavenly Master might not be able to take him down, but he was different. In terms of physical cultivation, he was stronger than the Heavenly Crystal Emperor. Coupled with his advantages in other aspects, he naturally surpassed the Heavenly Crystal Emperor. Yi Shiwen didn't stop after he had gained the upper hand in one move. He pounced forward once again. His arms were like dragons, and his fists were like mountains as they ferociously pounded down. The entire world's time and space froze for a moment. Even the chaotic energy had come to a standstill. It seemed as if this had lasted for eternity. The Heavenly Crystal Emperor was naturally unwilling to die like this. With a huge roar, his whole body vibrated with the laws of crystal. His aura soared into the sky, suppressing the chaos. He suddenly flew up and confronted Yi Shiwen again. Boom! However, the outcome wasn't any better than before. The Celestial Crystal Sovereign's body was covered in blood. If it could be said that his body was covered in dense cracks, as if he had suffered a heavy blow, then now he was completely bathed in blood. Golden blood gushed out like a fountain. His whole body flew out in an instant as if he was struck by lightning. He swept into the city fiercely. It was unknown how many buildings he crashed into and how many arrays and boundaries were directly penetrated. It was as if a world had crashed into the ground, and the entire moon city trembled slightly. Extremely terrifying. Boom! Yi Shiwen rushed up again. The aura in his body was boiling, igniting the chaos. He held the Martial Supreme Seal in one hand and smashed it down. This Martial Supreme Seal grew bigger and bigger, and soon it smashed down like a mountain. Boom! The Heavenly Crystal Emperor screamed and was directly smashed into pieces. However, Yi Shiwen didn't intend to let him go at all. He chased after him again, and the Martial Supreme Seal continued to fall like raindrops. Every time, the Heavenly Crystal Emperor would be severely injured. The Heavenly Crystal Emperor was good at physical cultivation, but when he was completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen in this aspect, he completely lost the means to fight back. Unlike Yi Shiwen, who was almost omnipotent and had no weaknesses at all, he would not be easily restrained by others. Finally, after a scream, the Heavenly Crystal Emperor's spirit was finally destroyed. At this time, Yi Shiwen looked around and found that he was already very deep into the Moon City. Chapter 35-45. Yi Shiwen chased after the Heavenly Crystal Emperor all the way. In just a short time, he had already penetrated deep into the Moon City. Although the Moon City was a city, its area was much larger than an ordinary world. After looking around, Yi Shiwen felt that something was amiss. It was too easy for him to penetrate deep into the city. Although there were not many people in the entire Moon City who could stop him with his strength, it was another matter that he did not encounter any obstruction. At this time, it seemed that the Ancient Era Alliance army had finally realized that the city wall boundary had been breached. They finally brought out their killer weapon. Yi Shiwen almost immediately felt a huge pressure crushing down. This pressure was like a huge sharpness pressing on top of his head as if it would fall at any time. Above Moon City, an incomparably huge silhouette rose. This silhouette looked blurry, and it was impossible to make out the silhouette at all. It was as though the entire person was a huge word for demon. Demonic chi surged into the sky, almost capable of crushing the entire chaos. Just the pressure that leaked out a little was enough to make everyone feel as though they were about to vomit blood. All the blood in their bodies gushed out uncontrollably, surging towards the figure of the word demon. In reality, this was not an illusion. In an instant, many people on the battlefield exploded, and their essence blood gathered like rivers and lakes, then surged towards this figure. These people were from the Fortune God Dynasty Alliance Army and the Ancient Era Alliance Army. There was no difference at all. Under this demon figure, all of them were trembling. In particular, the armies on both sides that were close to this demon figure exploded almost at the same time. Millions of people died tragically. As it absorbed more and more blood essence, the silhouette became more and more solid. Everyone saw that it was a peerless devil, completely covered in black scales. Each scale was a world of the devil path, and there were endless devil flames burning on its body. Even in this boundless chaos, it was extremely dazzling. From afar, people could see it, and from afar, they could feel a kind of overwhelming superiority causing them to tremble in fear. Attack! Don't let him form. Countless Fortune Divine Dynasty's armies shouted in unison, especially the 10 Divine Cities allied army. Many of them had participated in the Moon Cities crusade and had seen this terrifying existence with their own eyes. Naturally, they knew what kind of terrifying slaughter this unparalleled demon would create when it was fully formed. With a single move, the entire army would be wiped out. They're finally here. At this time, in the center of the Fortune God Dynasty's army, the middle heavenly venerate jumped to his feet. His eyes were bright and piercing as he stared fixedly at the giant devil shadow in the distance. He knew that the most important and terrifying collision had finally arrived. Under his gaze, there was a figure supporting the gigantic demonic figure with his own strength. As if sensing the middle heavenly venerate's gaze, he lifted his head and smiled coldly at him. If Yishuan was here, he would definitely recognize that this person was the true body of Demon Venerate Luo Hua, whom he had just killed. At this time, Demon Venerate Luo Hua was standing on a grand array, exuding boundless devil chi that supported the giant devil shadow. Many of the Fortune God Dynasty's armies aimed their attacks at the giant devil shadow, but it was useless. No matter what kind of attack landed on the unparalleled demon, it couldn't hurt him in the slightest. This devil shadow was hundreds of thousands of miles tall, and a casual movement could set off a terrifying chi dragon that was hundreds of thousands of miles long, wreaking havoc. Whether it was the Fortune God Dynasty's army or the Ancient Era's allied army, all of them died tragically and turned into a mass of blood essence that was absorbed by the devil shadow. Everyone could see that this was the demonic shadow absorbing the essence blood to accumulate power. Once it was full, it would launch a terrifying attack. Many of the Ancient Era's armies retreated rapidly, cursing in their hearts. This devil shadow didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and even they would die if they got close to it. It was just that in order to protect Moon City, they had no choice but to cooperate with the Demon Era. Otherwise, they would have already fallen out with each other. Suddenly, the demonic figure slowly opened his palm, and everyone saw that a demonic axe was gradually taking shape in his palm. As it absorbed more and more blood essence, the speed at which the demonic axe took shape became faster and clearer. The hundreds of millions of soldiers on the battlefield could feel the terrifying pressure that came from the demonic axe when it took shape. Some people only felt the pressure that filled the sky, and if they were not careful, they would explode on the spot and have their blood essence absorbed. As the speed at which the demonic axe took shape increased, more and more people were directly blown up into blood essence, which in turn facilitated the creation of the demonic axe. Boom! Finally, the devil axe was completely formed, and then the giant devil shadow slashed down fiercely. In an instant, it felt as if the world had frozen. Time, space, everything had been frozen. Everything in the world had been completely frozen. Wherever the demonic axe passed by, the entire primordial chaos would be sliced apart, revealing an incomparably huge crack. It was pitch black and extremely terrifying. Many of the elites of the 10 divine cities were on the verge of collapse. If it weren't for their strict training and discipline, they would have already turned and fled. This was because they had a very deep impression of this devil axe. Previously, this devil axe had chopped down and smashed the allied army of the 10 divine cities into pieces. Many god kings and emperors died, and even many heavenly venerables failed to dodge and were turned into ashes on the spot. The entire army had been crippled with just one strike. That terrifying might was forever imprinted in their hearts, and they would never forget it for the rest of their lives. That terrifying scene was still fresh in their minds even now. This giant devil axe directly fell on the Fortune God Dynasty's army, wanting to defeat the Fortune God Dynasty's army just like the last time. What kind of terrifying power was this? This devil axe looked slow, but was actually fast. It fell like a bolt of lightning. Every time it fell, many of the Fortune God Dynasty's elites were unable to withstand its sharpness. Their bodies exploded, turning into clouds of blood mist that were absorbed by the devil axe. The world froze, and everyone held their breath. Everything stopped moving, as if they were in a domain. Life and death were no longer in their control. And at this moment, a mountain appeared before the demonic axe. When the force of the demonic axe landed on the mountain, it was unable to disperse it at all. In the blink of an eye, the mountain began to grow, turning into an enormous mountain range that stood in the middle of the chaos, blocking the Fortune Divine Dynasty's army and the devil axe. The mountain range grew at an unparalleled speed. Very soon, it turned into a large piece of land. Mountains, plains, lowlands, and even the sea and the sky were formed. It was a world. That's the Fortune God Dynasty. Many people recognized it. Wasn't that a miniature version of the Fortune God Dynasty? Then, this small world turned into a scroll and blocked the demonic axe. The terrifying sharpness of the devil axe was blocked just like that. After slamming into the miniature world, it was unable to move an inch further. It was completely blocked. Seeing that the terrifying attack was finally blocked, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's elites who felt as if they had escaped death cheered in unison. These were powerful existences who had confirmed their Tao. Their mentality was very strong. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them, they wouldn't bat an eyelid. But this time they were too close to death. This was an attack that could destroy heaven and earth. The last time the Fortune God Dynasty's allied forces were annihilated like this, that feeling of helplessness made everyone panic. But now it was different. Many people suddenly remembered that this was the Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune Universe map. Many of the Fortune God Dynasty's elites had never seen the Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty. But it didn't stop them from hearing about the Fortune God Dynasty's stabilizing pillar. It had protected the Fortune God Dynasty through crisis after crisis. Many people felt incomparably relieved. Although the ancient era's allied forces had a terrifying killing weapon like the heaven-splitting devil axe, they also had the Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty. Compared to the heaven-splitting devil axe, they also had the Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty's Fortune God Dynasty. What's there to be afraid of? For a time, the entire Fortune God Dynasty's army's morale soared. On the other hand, the ancient era's allied army couldn't be compared to the Fortune God Dynasty in terms of military strength. Moreover, no one knew when the so-called reinforcements from the Fortune God Dynasty would arrive. If the internal situation of the Fortune God Dynasty was already very complicated, with all the major forces doing their own things, then the ancient era's allied army wasn't as simple as just doing their own things. In fact, they were even hostile towards each other. It wasn't easy to form an allied army, and they couldn't send reinforcements one by one to their deaths. However, it was extremely difficult to unite the allied army. It could be said that for a very long time, they could only rely on these few people in Moon City. Facing the Fortune Divine Dynasty's imposing army, they felt despair for the first time. In their hearts, their greatest reliance was the heaven-splitting demon axe. But now, even the heaven-splitting demon axe had been blocked. So how could they reverse this seemingly doomed situation? Chapter 3546. The heaven-splitting demonic axe was blocked by the universe creation map. The sharp strike of the heaven-splitting demonic axe, which contained the power of countless people, slashed into the universe creation map. Every minute and every second, a large area of the world would be destroyed. However, the universe creation map would stubbornly produce more worlds to fill the gap, wrapping and digesting this terrifying strike. If the attack of the heaven-splitting demonic axe could be said to be an incomparably terrifying mountain torrent, destroying all the obstacles that dare to stand in front of it, then the obstruction of the Good Fortune universe map was like a thick soil-carrying virtue, blocking soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. No matter how terrifying the attack was, it could be wrapped up and melted little by little. This attack, which contained the hope of the ancient era's allied army, was actually blocked by someone. This meant that their state of mind had collapsed. This was their greatest hope, and also their only hope to win against the many. Just like last time, when they were almost unable to stop the 10 great divine cities' allied army, the heaven-splitting devil axe had chopped down, smashing the 10 great divine cities' allied army into pieces, causing them to flee in defeat. Only then did they manage to protect Moon City. But now, their only hope was torn to shreds. This was similar to the despair that the Fortune God Dynasty's army had felt when they faced the heaven-splitting devil axe's attack. It was a soul-tearing despair, and they didn't even have the hope to escape. The Fortune God Dynasty's army was attacking them from all directions. In the center of the Fortune God Dynasty's army's formation, the middle heavenly venerate stood tall in the chaos. His robe fluttered without any wind, and the sun, moon, and stars appeared around him. The place where he stood seemed to be the center of the chaos. Above his head, the creation of the universe map finally revealed itself. Beneath his feet, a formation pattern that was covered in golden threads was revolving rapidly, transforming into terrifying energy that surged into his body, constantly replenishing his huge consumption. If it weren't for this, even a powerful middle heavenly venerate wouldn't be able to activate the Fortune universe map with their own strength. Every second that the Fortune universe map was activated consumed a massive amount of resources that couldn't be calculated. Only the Fortune God Dynasty could support such consumption. Therefore, unless it was a life and death crisis, they wouldn't use the Fortune universe map under normal circumstances. Even when the Fortune God capital was on the verge of falling, they didn't use the Fortune universe map. Firstly, the actions of the several great heavenly venerates of the Fortune God Dynasty had provoked public anger, which was tantamount to strangling other people's future. In that situation, using the Fortune universe map was useless. Secondly, they also knew that the foreign domain's allied army wouldn't really attack the Fortune God capital. Otherwise, they would just be courting death. In fact, they wouldn't need to use the Fortune universe god. But it was different this time. Facing the heaven-splitting demonic axe, unless they used the Fortune universe map, who could resist such a terrifying attack? He'd already recognized the person who was controlling the split devil axe. It was none other than his old rival, the Rahu Demon Exalt. In fact, he'd fought the Rahu Demon Exalt quite a few times, and they'd fought more than once when he was still training in the battlefield of the epical era. At that time, they didn't have their current status and strength, but they were old rivals and had a good understanding of each other. Now, they were both peak existences in the Devil Epic and Martial Epic. This time, using the heaven-splitting demonic axe and the Fortune universe map to fight carried the hopes of both sides. If the Fortune of Heaven and Earth diagram remained, then the Fortune God Dynasty's army would be able to recapture the Moon City without any hindrance. If the heaven-splitting devil axe remained, then the Fortune God Dynasty's army would suffer the same heavy losses as the 10 divine cities' allied army. Therefore, there couldn't be the slightest mishap. The middle heavenly venerate continuously formed hand seals. Above him, the Fortune universe map seemed to come to life, and a powerful figure that was hundreds of thousands of miles tall walked out of it. This figure possessed unimaginably terrifying strength, and soon, it took human form under the nourishment of endless energy. It was a youthful figure clad in a supreme imperial robe. His expression was incomparably cold, and when his eyes opened and closed, it seemed as if he was creating and destroying the world. Countless laws of an epoch revolved around him, as if he was the embodiment of heaven and earth, and all the figures between heaven and earth were projections of his will. Fortune God Monarch. It's the Fortune God Monarch. Some old antiques and old monsters cried out, tears streaming down their cheeks as they recalled the time when they followed the Fortune God Monarch to war. There was no comparison between now and now. Although the Fortune God dynasty's foundation wasn't as deep as it was now, under the Fortune God Monarch's leadership, they had been invincible. Especially when they had just risen, it was unknown how many powerful enemies they had defeated. Some were from within the Fortune God dynasty, and some were from the outer realms. Later, the flames of war had spread to many ancient epics. It could be said that they were awe-inspiring, and even those powerful ancient epics have been uprooted. This kind of strength was something that the ancient epics didn't even dare to look at. Now that they had a chance to see the Fortune God Monarch again, even if it was only his afterimage, it was enough to excite them. It wasn't just the old antiques of the Fortune God dynasty who recognized the Fortune God Monarch. In fact, many old antiques and old monsters from the ancient epics had also recognized the imposing figure, because this wasn't the first time they had set their sights on the martial epic. In the past, they had fought with the Fortune God dynasty. Although they were very strong, they were still defeated in the face of the Fortune God dynasty's might. They couldn't resist the Fortune God Monarch's terrifying strength. They naturally knew the strength of the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch. Although they also knew that this was only the remnant of the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch's divine sense that was attached to the Creation Universe map, it was still very terrifying to be able to withstand the attack of the heaven-splitting demonic axe. As for the incomparable demonic figure holding the heaven-splitting demonic axe, it wasn't difficult for them to guess that it was the demon ancestor of the devil epic. Unlike the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, the demon ancestor's era was far too distant. Many epochs ago, even heaven and earth had been destroyed several times. Apart from a few truly old fogies who had lived through many epochs, no one knew about the demon ancestor of the Devil Tao epic. Their knowledge of him was limited to legends. Now that they had the opportunity to truly experience the great name that had been sung for countless epochs, many people were extremely shocked. Both of them were the top experts of their respective epochs, and their names were destined to be sung again and again. Even if they had survived countless great apocalypses and everything had been destroyed, even if the epoch they lived in had been destroyed, they would still exist. Their names would be engraved in the minds of every living creature and passed down in their bloodlines from generation to generation. It was not easy to encounter an expert of this level, let alone to see a battle between them. Many people were dumbfounded, as if they were watching a miracle. They might not be able to see a battle of this level even after an epoch had been destroyed. The confrontation between the Dominator Tao tools left behind by the two was already very frightening. The Fortune God Monarch's remnant shadow appeared, holding the Fortune Creation Universe scroll, and launched an attack. He directly turned his palm over. So what if it wasn't the Fortune Creation Universe palm? This was a peerless martial technique that had been lost for a long time. Now, only Yi Shiwen had been taught it, and no one else knew about it. They could only watch helplessly as the palm came down. The entire world changed color, and the primal chaos came to a standstill. It was a bit like the heaven-splitting demonic axe's attack. It was an extremely terrifying attack of the same level, and the resulting power seemed to be quite similar. In order to launch this attack, the middle heavenly master felt as if all the magic power in his body was about to be used up. At this moment, he somewhat understood how demon venerable Luo Ho felt. This feeling was really terrible. Fortunately, there was a steady flow of energy from the Great Formation to replenish his consumed magic power. However, it was impossible for him to fight for a long time, so he had to get rid of his opponent in a short time and end the battle quickly. In the face of this terrifying palm, the demon ancestor's remnant shadow also began to move, and the heaven-splitting demonic axe in his hand also chopped down. Boom! The entire sky was boiling, and the endless primal chaos was stirred up by the shock waves from the collision of the two figures, forming monstrous waves that almost shattered everything. Both sides consciously avoided the armies below. After all, they were armies from their own era. If the two figures were to start a massacre, it would be enough to destroy both armies. This kind of power was too terrifying, so even they had to be careful. Even so, it still created a terrible pressure for many people. Some people who were too close to the battle and didn't have time to dodge turned into a mass of blood mist on the spot and were devoured by the two wills. Boom, boom, boom. Both sides fought all the way into the depths of the primal chaos. The two peerless supreme treasures attacked each other in the depths of the primal chaos, and even attracted some powerful figures who revealed some faint interest. These two were supreme treasures, and ordinary people couldn't even see them. At this moment, seeing that the two terrifying figures were fighting further and further away, both sides breathed a sigh of relief and continued to fight. At this moment, Yishuan, who was in the city, was stopped by a figure. "It's actually you. What do you want?" Chapter 35:47. It's you. What do you want? The person who appeared in front of Yishuan was none other than Supreme Bone. He stood in front of Yishuan. Yishuan's eyes began to look a little dignified. At this time, the battle outside the city was in full swing, but in general, the battlefront had not completely advanced into the Moon City. The reason why he broke in was to chase after Heavenly Crystal Emperor, and this Supreme Bone seemed to have come with ill intentions. It would have been fine if it was any other time, but Yishuan had just offended him. Based on Yishuan's observation, this Supreme Bone was definitely not a magnanimous person. He would definitely not let it go, and he must have come with ill intentions. However, Yishuan did not care, because although Supreme Bone had also entered the sixth realm, in his opinion, it was impossible for him to pose any fundamental threat. However, the appearance of Supreme Bone at this time was not a good sign. At this critical moment of conquering the Moon City, it was definitely not a good thing to have such an internal strife. Moreover, this was not outside, but in the Moon City itself, which was an absolute danger. The result of a lone army entering deep into the enemy's territory was the tree that stood out in the forest. Yishuan was strong, but it was not to the point where he could ignore everything. Last time, the City Lord of Moon City had almost killed him, forcing him to flee for his life. Even now, he still remembered it vividly. Of course, the Moon City Lord did not end up well in the end, but Yishuan was not such a reckless person. He was not willing to take such risks easily. If he had not coincidentally encountered the E-Wood Azure Dragon, he did not know how long it would take for him to recuperate with his injuries at that time. Wu Zun, even if you were to die quietly here, I'm afraid no one would know. Supreme Bone sneered and looked at Yishuan. Supreme Bone, I think you are tired of living. Do you really think that I dare not kill you because we are in the same camp of the Fortune God dynasty? You think you can kill me with your strength? You are overestimating yourself. We are both in the sixth realm. Let's talk if you can withstand one move from me. Since Supreme Bone dared to ambush him here, then there was no need for him to retreat. This was because he knew very well that this was the Moon City. It was indeed not a place to stay for a long time. It was too dangerous. Yishuan shouted loudly and attacked him directly without any hesitation. Since Supreme Bone dared to ambush him here, then there was no need for him to retreat. Yishuan took a step forward. In an instant, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. The entire Moon City trembled. Many elites of the ancient era's allied forces nearby suffered a calamity under his step. They collapsed on the spot and turned into blood mist. Then, Yishuan took a step and arrived in front of Supreme Bone. His fine black hair fluttered in the wind. His whole body's vital energy and blood soared to the sky and transformed into battle chi that filled the sky. Looking from afar, he looked like a huge sun that could burn down the heaven and earth as he rushed over. Boom! Yi Shiwen brandished his fist. In an instant, the sun, the moon, and the galaxy revolved along with his fist. The surging fist energy streaked across the vast sky, stirring up the entire sky. His aura was simply too strong. When it spread out in an instant, who knew how many barriers and formations in the city were destroyed? The energy of this punch was like a green dragon dancing in the air. It was tens of thousands of miles long, wreaking havoc and erupting. 81 green dragons danced in the air and fell directly towards Supreme Bone, swallowing the sun and the moon. Not good. Supreme Bone suddenly felt a chill on his back. This terrifying power made him tremble all over. It was too horrifying. Yi Shiwen's attack easily surpassed the limit of the 6th realm and was approaching the 7th realm. It was his first time seeing someone who could break through the boundary of the realm with such a fist energy. In front of him, countless golden bones appeared instantly and turned into a huge shield wall, blocking in front of him. Bang! Yi Shiwen's fist energy broke through the shield wall directly. Yi Shiwen's entire arm was submerged in it, and he was already in front of Supreme Bone. This golden bone shield wall couldn't stop Yi Shiwen at all. It could only slow down his movements a little, that's all. However, it was also in this short period of time that Supreme Bone's figure almost teleported 100,000 miles away. Only then did he barely avoid the terrifying fist energy of this punch. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Blood dripped from Supreme Bone's forehead. Although it was stronger than the terrifying fist energy of this punch, a fist mark still appeared on his forehead. His skull, which was the hardest part of his body, had actually cracked. He did not move an inch, but his eyes were full of horror. Although he had already estimated Yi Shiwen's strength, he was still injured, even though most of the power of this blow had been blocked. If Yi Shiwen had used his full strength, his head would have exploded in the air. This punch was too terrifying. Without using any martial arts or magical power, it was enough to crush everything just by relying on his tyrannical body. Yi Shiwen's cultivation had really reached an incredible level when he had reached this stage. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly when he failed to kill Supreme Bone in one blow. He immediately understood and looked at Supreme Bone, saying, "You've actually stepped into the 7th realm. With his strength just now, only death would await an ordinary 6th realm expert. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he was basically invincible among those in the same realm. Those in the 6th realm who could withstand a punch from him were all well-known figures. Yes, I have indeed stepped into the 7th realm." Supreme Bone's eyes were incomparably cold. "I now understand why Tong Zun died in your hands. With his strength, he was indeed not qualified to stop you." Yi Shiwen curled his lips. In fact, he was not in his current realm when he killed Tong Zun. Otherwise, he could have killed Tong Zun with one punch and would not have been entangled by the Moon City Lord who had rushed over. However, if it were not for the Moon City Lord, he would not have had such a fortuitous encounter. It could be said that everything was predestined. "You seem to be stronger than the rumors," Supreme Bone said coldly. "Today, I was too arrogant. I thought that I could kill you here with my own strength." Yi Shiwen noticed the meaning in Supreme Bone's words and could not help but say, "Why? You have someone behind you? You don't have to trick me. It's true. Initially, I was wondering why Demon Venerable Luohu would give a death order to kill you. Even if you killed Tong Zun and the subordinates of the Moon City Lord let you escape, it shouldn't be to the extent that someone at the level of Demon Venerable Luohu would pay attention to you. I didn't expect you to have such hidden strength," said Supreme Bone. "You're actually cooperating with the people of the Devil Era? No, if I'm not mistaken, you should be a spy planted by the Devil Era?" Yi Shiwen said with squinted eyes, but a very dangerous light flashed in his eyes. How smart was Huang Xiaolong now? He was able to deduce all kinds of conclusions almost instantly. If the Devil Dao Era had only cooperated with the Devil Dao Era, it shouldn't have reached this point. If the Devil Dao Era wanted to kill him, even the slightest bit of this news would be enough to kill him. Not only would he be hunted down by the Fortune Divine Dynasty for eternity, but the sect he founded would also be annihilated in an instant. Regardless of whether this sect had any connection with the Devil Dao era or not, the Fortune Divine dynasty would not allow such a hidden danger to exist among them. Even if they had cooperated in the past, it was impossible for the Devil era to coerce and use Supreme Bone to work for them. It was simply impossible, even if the Devil era announced this everywhere. As long as Supreme Bone did not admit it, no one could do anything to a celestial master like him. Once the demonic path epic did this, it would be difficult for anyone to cooperate with them in the future. This kind of person who did not follow the rules would not be welcomed anywhere. Since all possibilities have been eliminated, the remaining one, no matter how unbelievable it was, could only be the truth. Supreme Bone was actually a spy planted by the Devil era. Only in this way would he obey the orders of the Devil era and take the risk of exposing himself to deal with Yishiwen. You're very smart, but you're still going to die. Supreme Bone's eyes exuded a fierce killing intent. Yishiwen had guessed the truth, which meant that only one of them would die. Once Yishiwen escaped, he would not have a foothold in the Fortune God dynasty at all. He could only escape back to the Devil era. It seems that Demon Lord Luoho really thinks highly of me. You actually risked exposing yourself to kill me. Yishiwen's expression was slightly solemn. He did not care about Supreme Bone, but the real danger was Demon Lord Luoho. He was an outstanding figure in the entire Devil era, and there were only a few people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. His status was similar to the heavenly masters of the Fortune God dynasty, the City Lord of Moon City, and others, because he also knew that the laws of cultivation were also different in different eras. If Supreme Bone wanted to cultivate martial arts like the creatures in the Fortune God dynasty, not only would he have to scrape off his own cultivation and comprehension, but he would also have to endure endless pain. Moreover, the Devil era would also have to pay a huge price to deceive everyone and send him to the Fortune God dynasty. They also had to secretly support his cultivation. To grow to the level of Supreme Bone, the resources needed were simply unimaginable. The Fortune God dynasty also had spies buried in various ancient eras, and all kinds of spies were playing out all the time. If he continued to grow, it was not impossible for him to become a true high-level official of the Fortune God dynasty in the future. Now that he had exposed himself for Yishiwen, it could be said that Demon Lord Luoho valued him very much. Yishiwen suddenly felt that there was a sword hanging over his head, which could fall at any time. But Demon Lord Luoho thinks too highly of you. Do you think you can stop me? Yishiwen said proudly. After figuring out these things, he understood why Supreme Bone was targeting him. Perhaps the friendship with Supreme Copper was only secondary. The key was the order from the Devil era. And it was not surprising that Demon Lord Luoho knew his name. Although he had been using a fake name from the beginning, he did not change his appearance. A little investigation would reveal the result. I may not be able to kill you alone, but Demon Lord Scarlet Serpent will come soon and kill you personally. Chapter 35:48. Indeed, it's impossible for me to kill you with my strength alone. However, Crimson Serpent Demon Lord will come to kill you soon. Venerable Bone said coldly. Initially, he wanted to kill Yishiwen by himself. After all, Yishiwen seemed to be in the 6th realm no matter how he looked at it. Venerable Bone's hidden strength was in the 7th realm. He had already stepped into the realm of a high-level celestial master. However, he did not expect that he was not Yishiwen's opponent at all. It was just a simple punch. If he had not erupted with the strength of the 7th realm, his head might have been smashed. Therefore, he instantly adjusted his plan from killing Yishiwen alone to intercepting Yishiwen. Yishiwen was too terrifying. However, after this battle, he knew that he would be exposed. As long as Yishiwen sent out a message, he would not be able to stop him. As for the sect he founded, it was likely that it would not be able to escape death in the end and would be destroyed. He naturally felt distressed about this, but there was nothing he could do. From the day he became a spy, all of this had long been within his expectations. The only question was when he would be used as a trump card. However, He did not expect that this trump card of his would be used to deal with Yishuan. In the end, the real killer move still depended on Crimson Serpent Demon Lord. With Crimson Serpent Demon Lord, Yishuan would definitely die. Although there was news that Yishuan and the Moon City Lord were both injured, he did not believe it. What kind of joke was that? What kind of person was the Moon City Lord? Although he had already stepped into the 7th realm and was a high-level heavenly venerate, he was still far from being comparable to the Moon City Lord. The gap between the two couldn't be calculated with logic. The Moon City Lord wouldn't need to spend much effort to kill him. At the level of the Moon City Lord, he was already standing at the peak of all heavenly masters. Yishuan was not even at the 7th realm. Although he had combat strength that surpassed the 6th realm, that was all. He was far inferior to the Moon City Lord. Crimson Serpent Demon Lord was a figure at the same level as the Moon City Lord. How could Yishuan escape when Crimson Serpent Demon Lord personally came to kill him? However, Crimson Serpent Demon Lord was currently assisting Demon Lord Rahu in controlling the heaven-splitting demonic axe. It would take him some time to escape. Otherwise, he would not need to expose this trump card of his. However, there was no other way. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When Yishuan escaped, it would be impossible for them to make a move. Even so, he still resented Yishuan for forcing him to expose himself. Of course, cultivating in the demonic epic would not be as fast as cultivating in the martial epic. After all, the martial epic was the current epic, the strongest. It could suppress many ancient epics by itself. It could be said to be the will of heaven. Serpent Demon Lord had experienced countless dangers before he could sneak into the Fortune God dynasty. Just scraping away the laws and great Tao he cultivated was enough to kill him. Over 100 emperors tried at the same time, but he was the only one who survived. This showed how difficult it was. In the Fortune Divine dynasty, Huang Xiaolong had obtained many more fortuitous opportunities compared to the Devil Tao era. From an Emperor realm emperor, he had become a high-level heavenly venerable. If this continued, Huang Xiaolong might have a chance to become a peak heavenly venerable like the Moon City Lord, an unparalleled and tyrannical existence that had dominated the 9 heavens and 10 earths for many eras. But now, Yishuan had ruined everything. After this battle, regardless of victory or defeat, he could only escape back to the demonic Crimson Serpent Demon Lord. Even if he had a way to turn what he had learned into the demonic Crimson Serpent Demon Lord, the heavenly Tao of the demonic Crimson Serpent Demon Lord was incomplete compared to the martial Crimson Serpent Demon Lord. It was not the peak. Under such circumstances, every step he took was extremely difficult. In many ancient epics, many heavenly masters might not be able to advance their cultivation by a single level even after an epic. Often, their cultivation would be the same as it was during the Great Apocalypse. After experiencing several great apocalypses, they would still be the same. It was extremely difficult. This was also why those heavenly masters did not cultivate properly and insisted on attacking the current epic. Only by destroying an epic like the martial Crimson Serpent Demon Lord and sacrificing the martial Crimson Serpent Demon Lord to their own heavenly Tao, perfecting their own heavenly Tao. Only then would it be easier for them to cultivate. But if their own era was destroyed, then these Empyreans would be like fish that had lost their water. Even if these fish became spirits, it would be useless. They would not be able to advance further in their cultivation because there would not be a sea that could accommodate them. Only by relying on others and finding a way to integrate into the new sea could they continue cultivating. This was also the fundamental reason why the Heavenly Talisman Immortal would rely on Yishuan. Even if he had a hand over the supreme ancestral symbol in exchange for such an opportunity. Without Yishuan's protection, she would not be able to obtain the recognition of the martial Crimson Serpent. Furthermore, she was severely injured. She would be like a stray dog living in fear. However, after relying on Yishuan, the martial Crimson Serpent clearly sensed that the rejection of her was not as strong, allowing her to be like a fish in water. Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate. Yi Shiwen's expression immediately turned grave. He had not fought with the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate before. However, based on his fight with the Moon City Lord, it was not difficult to guess the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate's strength. The difference between the two was probably not far. This place was also not the depths of the primal chaos where he fought with the Moon City Lord. If he fought here, he would die for sure. In this Moon City, Demon Venerate Luoho and Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate were known to hold down the fort in the demonic epic. Not to mention the other ancient epics. Although they might not be as strong as the demonic epic, there would always be one or two such experts in each epic. Some epics were not inferior to the demonic epic and had even more experts. It could be said that this was a land of death. This was also the reason why Yi Shiwen had retreated when he had suddenly realized that he had gone too deep. There were too many experts here. He could fight against any one of them if he stimulated the supreme ancestral symbol to erupt with his full strength. However, he would undoubtedly die if he encountered multiple experts at the same time. In the end, he was still too weak. Otherwise, he would not have ended up like this. If he had the cultivation of Demon Venerate Luoho and Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate, he could even resist the heaven-splitting demon axe with the supreme ancestral symbol. Even a sovereign Tao tool like that would not be able to kill him. The supreme ancestral symbol was an origin talisman that the talisman ancestor refined. Although it was not a sovereign Tao tool, it was not far off. It was more than enough to protect himself. However, he had to kill Supreme Bone first no matter what. Otherwise, when Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate arrived, the consequences would be simply unimaginable. At this moment, he looked at Supreme Bone again. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Supreme Bone also saw this and immediately erupted. He wanted to be the first to attack. Yi Shiwen's strength was too terrifying. He was only at the 6th realm. However, the combat power that he had erupted had exceeded the 6th realm. He could not help but fear him. "You want to kill me?" Supreme Bone roared. Golden bones began to grow all over his body. Soon, these bones condensed into a suit of armor and protected him. He was not stupid. He had seen how Yi Shiwen had broken through his bone shield wall with one punch. He naturally understood how terrifying Yi Shiwen's physical body was. In this regard, he did not want to fight head-on. Immediately after, he opened his palm. His flesh and blood slowly split open. Then, he pulled out a bone blade from within and ruthlessly slashed down. In an instant, the bone blade had already slashed in front of Yi Shiwen. All of this seemed to be very long, but it was actually very short. However, it was completed in just a moment. It had already slashed in front of Yi Shiwen. The golden bone hurriedly flew up like a waterfall, covering the sky and earth and destroying everything. Yi Shiwen was not to be outdone. His eyes released endless killing intent. With a roar, his hands burst out like two golden dragons. His fists smashed down like a mountain. Boom! With a loud noise, heaven and earth collapsed. Countless fluctuations of the laws spread out. Many of the approaching ancient-era coalition forces were swept into powder on the spot. They wanted to participate in such a battle, but they were still overestimating themselves. Bang! After this loud noise, there was another cracking sound. The bone blade in Supreme Bone's hand was directly broken. More than half of the blade flew out and was smashed by Yi Shiwen's punch. Supreme Bone's palm was bleeding. In the collision just now, the web between his thumb and forefinger had cracked after the collision. Suddenly, bone fragments were flying everywhere. Supreme Bone's eyes flickered with an extremely horrified expression. He knew that Yi Shiwen's physical body was very terrifying, so he put on the bone armor as soon as he came up. However, he was still injured in the first exchange. The blood continued to drip down, but Supreme Bone didn't care. He let the blood drip down, and it quickly turned into a vast golden ocean. It carried an earth-shattering momentum and rushed towards Yi Shiwen once again to kill him. Supreme Bone's speed was several times faster in this vast golden ocean. He was so fast that a bone spear appeared in his hand. The long spear streaked across the vast sky and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. He wanted to beat Yi Shiwen to death. Dang, but there was another loud noise. Yi Shiwen actually caught this blow with his bare hands. He grabbed the bone spear in his hand and suddenly grabbed it. Supreme Bone flew towards Yi Shiwen uncontrollably. "I'll send you to hell with one punch." Yi Shiwen roared. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist. Golden spiritual power overflowed from the gaps of his fingers. It surged like a storm and instantly blasted the flying Supreme Bone. Boom! With a loud noise, Supreme Bone flew out instantly and hit the ground hundreds of kilometers away. His body was also twitching because there was a big hole in his chest. It was blasted by Yi Shiwen's punch. Chapter 35-49. The terrifying shockwave from this blow had turned all the houses and buildings within a radius of tens of thousands of miles into nothingness. In just an instant, everything had been destroyed. Yi Shiwen's punch was too terrifying. Even Supreme Bone's bone armor was not his opponent at all. It was directly pierced through in one move. Puff! Supreme Bone spurted out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, he truly experienced the feeling of Bronze Lord back then. It was a feeling of despair. Yi Shiwen's cultivation was clearly inferior to his, but Yi Shiwen was much more ferocious than him when they fought. Yi Shiwen's combat power had far exceeded the realm that he possessed. His combat power could not be calculated by his own realm. No wonder Demon Lord Rahu would rather not rely on Crimson Serpent Demon Lord assistance and wanted Crimson Serpent Demon Lord to personally kill Yi Shiwen. Such combat power was not something that ordinary people could contend with. An extremely unwilling look flashed in his eyes. As a dignified expert of the 7th realm, he was actually beaten to such a state by a heavenly master of the 6th realm. Could it be that he could not even intercept Yi Shiwen at all? What a shame this was. Roar! Supreme Bone roared. Who do you think you are? The spiritual power in his entire body was burning crazily, like a burning ocean. Countless law talismans flew above the sky and danced violently. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, a golden rib appeared from the void and directly pierced into Yi Shiwen's head. Yi Shiwen raised his hand and smashed this golden rib into pieces. However, this wasn't the end of it. Golden bones had appeared everywhere in the void. It was unknown what kind of gigantic creature these bones belonged to. They were extremely powerful. Just one of them was enough to pierce through a world. Yi Shiwen was not to be outdone. His figure swayed slightly and actually transformed into thousands of figures, which went towards these golden ribs. Rumble. There was a violent collision sound, and the entire moon city trembled slightly. There was endless light flickering. Yi Shiwen instantly smashed these countless golden bones into pieces, turning them into golden bone powder that flew all over the sky. These seemingly powerful golden ribs couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen at all. It wasn't that they weren't powerful enough, but Yi Shiwen was too strong. This kind of pure physical attack wasn't Yi Shiwen's opponent at all. Wu Zun, go and die. At this moment, Supreme Bone, who had managed to gain a breather thanks to these golden bones, let out a long howl. Stepping on the golden sea of blood beneath his feet, 99 purple bone dragons had unknowingly appeared around him. Each of them had a domineering aura, as if they were the rulers of a world of death. Supreme Bone was very impressive. Originally, the Bone Tao's nomological law was born from the Death Tao, but he walked his own path and made this great Tao a Taoist, which was incomparably powerful. Although he was a spy, but he was indeed an amazing character, not an undeserved reputation. Unfortunately, he still encountered Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen could see that these 99 purple bone dragons were Supreme Bone's trump card, and also his origin bone. For him, they were naturally extremely important, and he had risked his life in order to stop Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't be stopped by him. Otherwise, the consequences would be simply unimaginable. The strength of Qi Lian Demon Lord was too strong. Even Yi Shiwen, who possessed the supreme ancestral symbol, had to be wary of him. Since you want to die, then I'll fulfill your wish. Yi Shiwen let out a long roar. An endless 7th metal ancestral energy flew out of his body. It condensed into a terrifying light beam above his head and soared into the sky. Even the enchantment of the Moon City couldn't stop it. Even the Middle Celestial Masters, War Masters, and others outside the Moon City could see that terrifying light beam. At this time, they couldn't see Yi Shiwen's specific situation. Their vision was blocked by the boundary, and they could only judge based on the gung metal ancestral chi. Yi Shiwen was probably in trouble. With Yi Shiwen's strength, even ordinary heavenly masters might not be his opponent and would be easily defeated by him. This endless gung metal ancestral chi formed a simple and unadorned sword above Yi Shiwen. This sword was engraved with the great Tao that belonged to the gung metal era. Although the gung metal era had been destroyed, it was swallowed by the martial Tao era, so its great Tao didn't fall. Instead, it became even more glorious. After joining the martial Tao era, it became even more terrifying. At this time, the purple bone dragon at the front had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen held the simple and unadorned sword and instantly slashed at the purple bone dragon. Bang! This purple bone dragon almost instantly touched the simple and unadorned sword. Then, wherever the sword light passed, the purple ancient dragons collapsed. This purple bone dragon was obviously the bone of Supreme Bone's origin. It wasn't easy for Yi Shiwen to destroy it forcibly with his physical body. It wasn't as simple as those golden bones. However, no matter how powerful this purple ancient dragon was, it was impossible to stop the long sword formed by the gung metal ancestral chi. Even the boundary of Moon City could be broken with one slash. Whoosh! After Yi Shiwen slashed this purple bone dragon, he didn't stop at all. Almost instantly, he flew up again and directly killed his way into the purple bone dragon formation. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's sword light slashed down continuously. Any purple bone dragon that got close to him couldn't resist at all, and they exploded one after another. Although the order of Yi Shiwen's slashes was different, the speed was too fast. From a distance, it looked as if these purple bone dragons exploded at the same time. At this time, Supreme Bone was almost scared to death by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast, and he was directly coming towards him. There was no time for him to stop him. His purple bone dragons were indeed very powerful. Perhaps even a low-level celestial master couldn't fight against any of them. However, when facing Yi Shiwen, it was just one slash. With this slash, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years of bitter cultivation would be gone. Up until now, he had only managed to cultivate these 99 purple bone dragons. Each of them contained his heart's blood and sweat, and each of them contained his countless years of cultivation. Yi Shiwen's advancing route was like a ray of light, and he instantly arrived in front of Supreme Bone. At this time, Supreme Bone had been forced into a corner. He wanted to block Yi Shiwen's advance and drag him here. He had thought that it was a very simple thing to do in the beginning. His only regret was exposing himself. However, he now realized how ridiculous and naive his initial thoughts were. Did this look like a very simple thing to him? He suddenly stomped his feet. Suddenly, the golden blood under his feet surged into the sky. The golden blood spread across the vast sky, and the raging waves beat against the shore. In the golden blood sea, golden skeletons appeared one after another. Some were in the shape of humans, and some were in the shape of ferocious beasts. At this time, under the acceleration of Supreme Bone's supernatural power, flesh and blood were growing out of them. They almost returned to their fierce appearance when they were alive and restored their magical powers in the past. They charged towards Yi Shiwen. Most of them were Emperor Lords, but there were also Celestial Master-level masters among them. They were all powerful opponents that Supreme Bone had killed in the past. Now that Supreme Bone had been forced into a corner, they resurrected one after another and charged towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. Around his body, countless flames were born out of thin air. In the void, a phoenix's cry shook the world. Countless flames condensed into a fire phoenix in the void. Then it grew bigger and bigger and directly charged towards these powerful, ferocious spirits that had resurrected. All the brilliance in the world became dim under the contrast of this fire phoenix. These powerful, ferocious spirits were the existence of extreme een and evil. When they encountered the unyielding and powerful flames like Nanmingly fire, it was like they had met their nemesis. Almost in an instant, they melted one after another. The flesh and blood that they had temporarily grown also disappeared in an instant. Then, even the golden skeletons were completely turned into nothingness in an instant. They could not stop Yi Shiwen's advance. Puff, puff, puff. As the golden skeletons were burned to ashes in front of the fire phoenix, Supreme Bone's struggle also disappeared. Even these means could not stop Yi Shiwen for a second. Originally, these golden skeletons of his were endowed with immortality. Even if they were killed by Yi Shiwen, they would quickly resurrect. This kind of means could not do anything to Yi Shiwen. After all, most of the experts that he had killed were quasi-emperors or emperor lords. Even celestial masters were few. How could they be compared to an expert like Yi Shiwen? However, delaying time was very effective. Who knew that Yi Shiwen had such a terrifying means? Those flames could restrain all een and evil in the world. This kind of means had really met their nemesis when they encountered Yi Shiwen's Nanmingly fire. Now, Yi Shiwen's understanding and cultivation of Nanmingly fire had far surpassed the level of the Phoenix ancestor. He could be said to be the first person in the world. How could he not be powerful? What other means do you have? No one can save you today. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. Thinking of Supreme Bone's sinister intention of delaying him and letting Red Serpent Demon Lord rush over, Yi Shiwen could not suppress the killing intent in his heart. As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, he had already arrived in front of Supreme Bone. At this time, Supreme Bone was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His chest that had been punched by Yi Shiwen had not fully recovered. All of this seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it was only a short period of time. It was just that Yi Shiwen was too tyrannical that everything seemed to take so long. Swish! The long sword in Yi Shiwen's hand swept out and split Supreme Bone into two halves on the spot. Supreme Bone's spirit was just about to escape when Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and spouted Nanmingly fire. The Nanmingly fire directly burned Supreme Bone's spirit into ashes. Yi Shiwen also grabbed his body. Suddenly, just when Yi Shiwen wanted to retreat, a terrifying coercion covered the sky and covered the earth. Chapter 35:50. Just as Yi Shiwen was about to retreat after killing Supreme Bone, an overwhelming coercion swept over. The direction of the coercion was Yi Shiwen's retreat route. It directly blocked Yi Shiwen's retreat route. Oh no, Scarlet Serpent Demon. Yi Shiwen immediately thought of who else could have such a terrifying coercion besides Scarlet Serpent Demon. Yi Shiwen was not afraid of ordinary celestial masters. However, it was another matter when it came to experts like Scarlet Serpent Demon. Yi Shiwen had already made a decision in a split second. Since his retreat route was blocked, he would cross the entire Moon City. Although the Moon City was also very vast, much vaster than the ordinary world, and there were mountains, lakes, skies, and seas in the Moon City, it was not a problem for a celestial master to cross it. The most crucial problem now was that there were a large number of ancient era experts in the Moon City. Only by crossing the Moon City quickly and catching them off guard could he escape. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen no longer hesitated. He flew out like an arrow and instantly disappeared from his original place. At the same time, when Yi Shiwen disappeared, a figure instantly appeared in place. It was none other than Scarlet Serpent Demon. There was a hint of anger on his face because he easily deduced the situation just now. Supreme Bone was killed in order to stop Yi Shiwen. In order to stop Yi Shiwen, Supreme Bone, the nail that was buried for a long time, was not only exposed but also died in the end. Martial Master, I must let you die without a burial place. Before Scarlet Serpent Demon's voice faded, his figure had already disappeared in place and chased in the direction of Yi Shiwen. At this time, Yi Shiwen's figure was constantly shuttling in the Moon City. With the speed of a celestial master, he could almost cross the entire distance of the Moon City in an instant. However, there were boundaries and arrays everywhere in the Moon City. The space was divided into pieces by various boundaries. There was no way to cross in an instant. This was also a kind of defensive boundary to prevent ancient era experts from attacking the center of the Moon City in an instant. However, this boundary now made Yi Shiwen depressed and prevented him from moving forward. The speed of the Scarlet Serpent Demon Lord was getting faster and faster. He couldn't stop even for a moment. However, even so, Yi Shiwen still arrived at the center of the entire Moon City very quickly. At this moment, in front of him was an incomparably huge array. The entire array stretched for tens of thousands of miles and was slowly activating. All kinds of runes were constantly floating above the array and flying up. The entire ancient array seemed to be accumulating some kind of terrifying power. It was slowly increasing and becoming more and more powerful. It was like a ferocious beast that was sleeping inside, but was about to awaken. The entire array spanned across the center of the entire Moon City, completely blocking Yi Shiwen's path forward. Yi Shiwen immediately thought of something. What were these ancient eras doing? Especially since he hadn't seen many ancient era's armies and experts along the way. It was as if all the ancient era's armies and experts were gathered near the Moon city walls. This kind of weak defensive line definitely couldn't stop the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, in the blink of an eye, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable had already caught up to him. Marshal Venerable, let's see where you can run to this time, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable said coldly to Yi Shiwen. Because there was a huge array in front of him, Yi Shiwen couldn't pass it all. However, Yi Shiwen made a decision in an instant. The supreme ancestral symbol flew out from his body and formed a protective shield above his head, spinning continuously. Then, Yi Shiwen flew out and directly rushed into the array. Although there seemed to be an unparalleled, terrifying power hidden in the array, and it wouldn't be easy to cross it, it was still much better than being caught up by the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable and having to fight him again. If he fought in this position, he wouldn't be able to escape. What? The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would choose to rush into the array. However, a sneer immediately appeared on his face. He walked to the side of the array and pinched a few seals. Then, the entire array started to operate in a strange way. Many boundaries were formed inside the array, and the entire array was isolated into many spaces. Humph! Marshal Venerable, you're too smart this time. Do you think you can cross this array? You're courting death. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable sneered slightly and said, because only he knew what kind of array was buried under the ground. Although Yi Shiwen had accidentally broken into it, Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to escape. Yi Shiwen would still die when the time came. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable watched for a while and saw that Yi Shiwen didn't show any signs of coming out. Only then, he sneered and turned to leave. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was already dead. It didn't matter whether he watched or not. Moreover, this place was also very dangerous. Moreover, Demon Venerable Luo Ho also needed his help outside, so he couldn't leave. If he could leave at will, he wouldn't have to sacrifice Bone Venerable, who had been buried for a long time. He could kill Yi Shiwen by himself. The two ends of the flower bloomed, and Yi Shiwen immediately felt the surging pressure as soon as he entered the array formation. It seemed as if the world didn't allow him to do so. A dreadful pressure ruthlessly fell on him, and it seemed as if he would be blasted into pieces in an instant. This was a pressure that even a heavenly venerable couldn't bear. All the excess power in the entire array poured into his body. Countless magic charms flew over one after another, just like a huge bomb exploding around him. Even with his skill, it was inevitable that he would be injured by these magic charms. Fortunately, he had the supreme ancestral talisman to protect him, so he didn't have to worry about it. However, the supreme ancestral symbol consumed an incomparable amount of spiritual energy every second. If it wasn't for the few king-level dragon veins previously, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for long. Yi Shiwen could see from afar that the core of the entire array was emitting dazzling light. It was as if a huge sun was being born in it, accumulating and absorbing energy at all times. Yi Shiwen was also very puzzled. Why did the people of the ancient era arrange such a large array here? However, he didn't have the time to think about it at this moment. Just as he was about to pass through the entire formation, the formation's operation suddenly changed again. The formation that was tens of thousands of kilometers in circumference was actually divided into small worlds. And he was also separated by 2 boundaries and trapped in them. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen blasted a punch, but found that he simply couldn't break this Zhen method. This Zhen method was protected by an inconceivably great power. The entire Zhen method was integrated into one. Unless he could destroy the entire Zhen method in one go, otherwise, attacking any one of the enchantments would be dispersed by the entire Zhen method. Yi Shiwen felt that this array was very strange. However, since he couldn't destroy it with absolute force in a short time, he simply sat down and started to attack from the inside. Yi Shiwen opened his magic eyes, and a mysterious space in his body began to operate. He began to analyze this array on the spot. Almost instantly, a Black King-level dragon vein in his body began to burn. This array was very exquisite, and it had the ability to absorb the majestic power of heaven and earth. It was very terrifying. As the ink-colored king-level dragon vein continued to burn, the mysteries of the entire formation were analyzed more and more. He originally had a very deep understanding of formations, but if he wanted to analyze a large formation of this level, it was not something that could be done in a short time. Therefore, he could only do it with the power of the mysterious space. However, it consumed a lot of king-level dragon veins. With a deeper understanding of this Zhen method, Yi Shiwen felt cold all over his body and his back. He had already analyzed the general usage of this Zhen method, although he was still unable to analyze its complete parts, but just a part of it was enough. This array was actually used for self-destruction. The range of this array was none other than the entire Moon City. Right now, the entire array was accumulating energy. Once it was completely accumulated, it would be time for it to self-destruct. In connection with the many scenes that Yi Shiwen had seen before, it seemed that those ancient eras only existed on the surrounding walls of Moon City. In fact, there weren't many in the middle of Moon City. Such a lineup couldn't stop the Fortune God Dynasty's army. It was only a matter of time before they broke through. Once the Fortune God Dynasty's army attacked, or even captured Moon City, the array would suddenly explode. The consequences would be unimaginable. Perhaps all the Fortune God Dynasty's army that attacked Moon City would be annihilated in an instant. Moreover, based on the power of this array, not to mention Moon City, even the Fortune God Dynasty's army camp would be affected. If it exploded, at least half of the Fortune God Dynasty's army would be wiped out. There wouldn't even be a battle before the entire Moon City was annihilated. How ruthless! Yi Shiwen's eyes flickered. At this time, he finally understood why there were so few Devil Dao Era's army in the entire Moon City. From the very beginning, the Devil Path Era's plan was to use this place to trap the Fortune Divine Dynasty's army. As for the other Ancient Era's armies that were buried along with them, they were merely cannon fodder to attract attention. Moreover, if this plan was successful, not only would the Fortune God Dynasty suffer, but the other Ancient Eras would also suffer. How could they have the ability to find trouble with the Devil Dao Era? It would be good enough if the Devil Dao Era didn't come knocking on their door to destroy them. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.